Chapter 1042. Mianhu City, the border between Deyu's western region and the Shizo dynasty. Surrounded by mountains and rivers, Mianhu City was the base of Yuxiong army, as well as the heart of the battlefield between Deyu and the Shizo dynasty. If the Shizo dynasty were to break through Mianhu City, the Nine Plains, the largest region in Deyu's western region, would be a piece of flat land. Originally, Deyu had laid out a dozen lines of defense in front of Mianhu City, but under the powerful offensive of the Shizo dynasty, they had all collapsed. Now, all the pressure was on Mianhu City. If Gao had not led the main force of Yuxiong army to Mianhu City more than a year ago, the Shizo dynasty would have long invaded the western region and directly threatened Yuxiong Plain. On the city wall, which had been temporarily reinforced with magic, Gao sat on a large chair, his upper body bared, overlooking the Shizo dynasty soldiers who were attacking the city like a swarm of ants. Originally, the city wall was no more than 30 feet high, but after Gao personally led the army to reinforce Yuxiong army, the supreme oracles who accompanied the army raised it to a height of 1,000 feet, and expanded it to a length and width of 100 miles. Its thickness was also more than 200 feet, and it was engraved with countless runes, making its defense extremely formidable. On top of that, the Yuxiong army, whose most ordinary soldiers were in the realm of second Panga heaven, was as powerful as a millstone, slowly grinding all the Shizo dynasty soldiers who dared to attack the city. Even most of the fiend gods from the outer domains were defeated here. Except for a fiend god who attacked the city a few months ago, no one from the Shizo dynasty could actually threaten Mianhu City. Even the great devil god, who had attacked the city, was killed by Yuxiong army with the help of the powerful city defense. The great fiend god's head was hanging on the flagpole behind Gao. It was a hideous face, with a few broken horns pointing weakly at the sky. He was a Tao-breaking fiend god, but he was killed by the Yuxiong army, which showed how strong the army was. He took a deep breath, and the muscles on his upper body began to wriggle like snakes. His right chest and left shoulder were respectively pierced by a thumb-sized golden arrow. This kind of arrow was a magic arrow specially made by the Shizo dynasty to deal with the strongest of the human race. The arrow contained a strong psychic power, a power that cursed the soul of the person who was hit by the arrow, never to be reincarnated. To powerful human beings with relatively weak souls, this kind of magic arrow was extremely lethal. Gao personally led his men to fight on the city wall, but they were ambushed by a divine archer hidden among the Shizo soldiers. If not for the fact that he had fused with the soul of a divine dragon, which made his soul 1,000,000 times stronger than the ordinary Deyu generals, he would have been killed by now. Even with the protection of the beast souls, Gao was badly wounded. The two magic arrows were very vicious, with wisps of psychic power tightly entangling his flesh. If he tried to pull them with brute force, he would surely pull out large pieces of his flesh, bones, and even internal organs. So, he could only use his own strength to slowly dissolve the psychic power in the arrows and force them out. He breathed out a scorching breath, then performed an incantation gesture with both hands in front of his dantian. Slowly, the incantation gesture changed, and the magic arrows in his flesh were forced out bit by bit. Suddenly, he asked, "What happened in the East Sea? Why did eldest brother die there?" The captains standing around Gao exchanged a glance and shook their heads at the same time. The situation in the East Sea was really complicated, and the will of the Wawang clan played a huge role in it. Apart from Emperor Haozuan and the few saint emperors, no one knew the details. As for Ji Dai's death, it was because he suddenly attacked Wu Qi and pretended to be the human emperor. It was obvious that Ji Dai was a man of sacrifice from the Celestial Court or the Buddhist League. This was a scandal to Deyu, so it was covered up. After all, several upheavals had taken place in Deyu, and it was not easy to calm the people down. If the world learned that Ji Dai was also a spy from the Celestial Court or the Buddhist League, it would be a heavy blow to the reputation and the people of Deyu. The East Sea and the Western region were very far apart, and it would take an ordinary gold immortal hundreds of years to travel from the East Sea to the Western region, even at the fastest speed. Now that De Yu was at war, all the teleportation formations were taken over by Liangzhu's emissaries, and the communication between the Western region and the East Sea was not smooth. On top of that, the higher-ups of Liangzhu had deliberately blocked the news, so Gao had no idea what was happening in the East Sea. Two crisp tinkling noises rang out as the arrows were finally forced out of Gao's body. Then, he took a deep breath. Wisps of purple energy rushed out of the wounds, and they healed quickly. King Dong Hai, Gao murmured with a gloomy face as he looked up at the celestial fiend gods who were attacking dozens of supreme towers. "Don't let me down, King Dong Hai," he said in a low voice. "If my eldest brother's death has something to do with you and the East Sea, you have to give me an explanation." Gao stamped his foot and snorted coldly. "Although there are times when I wish he could die, he is my eldest brother after all, and I can't let him die in your hands." Grinning coldly, Gao donned his armor and strode up to the battlements under the escort of his subordinates. Then, he shouted at the Shizou dynasty soldiers who were attacking the city, "What a bunch of useless fools. How many men have you lost in Mianhu City? 1 million? 2 million? You can't even take down a mere Mianhu City." Gao and the generals around him laughed at the Shizou dynasty soldiers. The morale of the Shizou dynasty soldiers plummeted, and the attacking army slowly retreated to the rear. Today's siege was over. These days, the Shizou dynasty's attacks had been so feeble, and no one knew what they were up to. Grinning coldly, Gao spun and descended the city wall. Naturally, there would be a deputy to take charge of the defense. Riding on his mount, Gao returned to the mayor's mansion. After taking off his armor and battle robe, he took a bath and changed into clean clothes, then was served wine and delicacies by maidservants. With a gloomy face, Gao ate as much as he could. Patting his muscular abdomen, he slowly rose to his feet and walked into the back hall. After a while, 4 men clad in armors who looked 70 to 80% similar to Gao came into the back hall and bowed in unison to Gao, who was sitting cross-legged in the hall. One of them, a middle-aged man who looked the oldest, asked respectfully, "Father, why did you summon us?" Fiddling with a small dagger in his hand, Gao said lazily, "You've done a good job guarding the 4 gates these days. But lately, the Shizou dynasty's offensive has weakened a lot. Clearly, they have something up their sleeves. The fate of De Yu is in turmoil, so you must work hard. Don't slack off." These 4 men were all Gao's sons, and they were known as Tiger, Leopard, Jackal, and Wolf respectively. Gao had given them the title of Fierce Beast in vain. Each of them was valiant and good at fighting, and they were famous for their bravery and strength among King Yangshan's descendants. Now, Gao was in charge of Yu Xiong army, and the 4 of them controlled more than 60% of the army's strength. Upon hearing Gao's words, the 4 of them cupped their fists and answered. At Gao's order, they took off their armors and sat down in the hall. Some maidservants brought them wine and meat, and the 4 of them ate heartily. These days, they had been guarding the 4 gates of Mianhu City, taking turns on the wall day and night. The Shizou dynasty's army had been harassing them day and night, so they had to eat, drink, and defecate on the wall. So, they rarely had time to eat a meal like this. Gao looked at his 4 sons with a rare gentleness in his eyes. Casually throwing the dagger aside, he said in a cold voice, I asked you to send a messenger to ask about the East Sea to your father-in-law. Have you received any reply?" Hu, the oldest of the 4 sons, raised his head and answered in a deep voice, "Father-in-law did, but he said that grandfather had strictly ordered me not to say anything related to the East Sea. So, I have no idea what happened in the East Sea." The other 3 sons shook their heads as well. Gao wanted to know what had happened in Donghai, but King Yangshan did not give him any clear information. Gao had tried to find out through his sons-in-laws, but in the end, it was all in vain. A little annoyed, Gao punched the ground and said with a cold snort, "What is father doing? Is there anything that I can't know?" The King of East Sea. King of East Sea. First, he established Yan Huang, then merged it with De Yu. Is he playing house? What does he want? Or, what is he doing now? Wu Qi, who was returning to Pangu world from the chaos, suddenly sneezed. He rubbed his nose and murmured something under his breath, then looked back at the place where he had plotted against Qian Shou and chuckled evilly. Ji Hu dropped the bone in his hand and said carelessly, "Father, that king of East Sea is just a lucky boy. Why do you think so highly of him? He was just a pawn under father's command in those years, and he was just blessed with the title of king. Even if he was killed by grandfather and the others and seized the East Sea from him, so what?" Grinning coldly, Gao glared at Ji Hu and scolded, "Nonsense. Do you really think the king of East Sea is just a lucky boy? In just over a decade, he has risen from a commoner to the title of king. Do you think it is so easy to get the title of king in Diyu? There are so many kings in Diyu, and every one of them is the result of the hard work of generations or even dozens of generations. But this king of East Sea, a commoner, only took him a little over a decade to become a king, and he even obtained the sacred emperor's Kunwa sword. How could he be an ordinary man?" Stroking a jade pendant on his belt, Gao narrowed his eyes and said in a cold voice, "Father is just afraid that he has a powerful background. Diyu is in a precarious situation now, and it can't afford any more turbulence. One Taoist league and one Buddhist league are enough to overthrow Diyu. If something happens to the king of East Sea, TSK." With a wave of his hand, the wine jar in front of Ji Hu flew into Gao's hand. He lifted it up and took a gulp, then murmured to himself, "This is really strange. Is there any inside story that even I am not allowed to know?" The matter of the Donghai Sea was concealed so tightly. Just a casual sentence of Donghai Sea on the official document was enough to cover it up. What is hidden in it? Gao's heart twitched violently as he said with a frown, "I have a bad feeling. Something big is going to happen." Ji Hu and his three brothers exchanged a glance, then bowed their heads disapprovingly and went back to eating and drinking. All of a sudden, hurried footsteps were heard as a general clad in golden armor burst into the back hall. "Your Highness, the Shizo dynasty's army has sent back a message." Chapter 1043. The golden-armored general who rushed into the back of the hall was over 5 meters tall, and his entire body reeked of blood. His expression was cold and solemn, and his eyes were as gloomy as those of a wild wolf that had eaten too many corpses. There was not a trace of emotion in his green eyes. Only when he saw Gao did his eyes flicker with a hint of fanaticism. Ji Hu and the other three looked up at the same time, then rose to their feet and bowed to the burly man whose face was covered with countless scars. "Brother Ao." The burly man's name was Gao's adopted son, and he was about 100 years older than Ji Hu and the other three sons. He had followed Gao for more than 300 years, and was the strongest general under his command. Gao was gifted with extraordinary strength, and his skin was as tough as steel, and he was immune to all poisons. When he was 7 years old, he was able to kill a poisonous flood dragon. When he was 13, he won the approval of a descendant of a divine beast, the black tortoise, and fused with its beast soul. Since then, his cultivation base had advanced by leaps and bounds. At the age of 30, he stepped into the second Panga heaven, and at the age of 60, he broke through to the Hongmeng Panga heaven. Now, he was one of the top experts in Diyu, and his cultivation base had broken through the limit of the third Panga heaven. Just like his name, Gao was Gao's most loyal and craziest mastiff. When Gao was away from home, he left all the military affairs in his fief to Gao. Gao was the only one who could make Gao feel at ease. Even some of Gao's secret forces, such as the Divine Stallion Battalion, were all under his control. Although Ji Hu and the others were Gao's sons, they were not as important as Gao. So, when they saw Gao barging in, they hastily rose to their feet and bowed. Looking at Gao, who was covered in blood, Gao asked in a cold voice, "What happened? Why are you covered in blood?" Gao looked down at the blood that had half congealed on his body, then casually wiped it on his armor, making the blood even more messy. I went to meet up with our spies, but I found a few bald thieves following us, so I killed them, he said disapprovingly. Gao narrowed his eyes and said, followed? In other words, they have been exposed. Jizhuo nodded and said, I've already brought them back to Mianhu City. We have enough spies in the Shizhou dynasty army anyway, so it doesn't matter even if these few people are exposed. After pondering for a moment, Gao asked in a deep voice, is there any movement from the Shizhou dynasty? Rubbing his scarred face with his blood-stained hand, Jizhuo grinned and said, I've found the reason why the Shizhou dynasty's army has been so weak these days. No one knows where the 7 old monks of the Buddhist League have gone, but they've all returned to the Spirit Vulture Mountain, severely injured. It's said that the head of the 7 Buddhist League's 7 ancestors, the Guarding Heart Old Monk, has his cultivation sealed by some kind of magical treasure, and now, the other 6 old monks are busy helping him deal with that magical treasure. Gao's eyes flickered as he chuckled and said, oh. This was interesting. No wonder those bald donkeys had been half-hearted when they attacked the city recently, and weren't as crazy as they had been in the past. That's a good thing. What else? Gao frowned and said in a deep voice, one more thing, Your Highness, you have to be extra careful in the near future. The Shizhou dynasty has set their eyes on Your Highness. They are plotting against Yu Xiong army. Ji Hu laughed and said, plotting? What kind of plotting? Are they planning to wipe out Yu Xiong army? Gao shook his head and said coldly, not wipe them out, but take control of Yu Xiong army. The rear hall fell into a dead silence. After a full 10 minutes, Gao sighed and said, take control of Yu Xiong army? What a big appetite. Aren't they afraid of being stuffed to death? Hee, what can they do to take control of Yu Xiong army? Gao, is this information reliable? Gao nodded seriously, then told Gao the source of the information. The general of the Shizhou dynasty who besieged Mianhu City was called Jade Flower Bodhisattva Rui, an outstanding disciple of the Joyous clan. In recent years, the Joyous clan had suffered a great loss, and even Amitabha Buddha was killed by a great dragon venerable who suddenly appeared in the Great Dragon Mountains. Therefore, Jade Flower Bodhisattva Rui was very likely to take over the position of one of the Buddhas of the Joyous clan, which made his status even more important. As a disciple of the Joyous clan, Jade Flower Bodhisattva Rui had the characteristics of a disciple of the Joyous clan. Although he was away on expeditions, he was accompanied by 300 female disciples, who were in fact his cultivation vessels. Among them, the most favored female disciple was called Suet Fat Goddess, also known as Goddess of the Night, which was a compliment to her skin, which was as smooth and translucent as the finest mutton fat jade, and could even glow at night. These 300 female disciples all kept a large number of gigolos, and among the spies that Gao placed in the Jin dynasty's army, there were a few handsome young men. They caught the eye of the sheep-fat goddess, and now they were the freshest and most favored gigolos around the sheep-fat goddess. Blessed by Bodhisattva Rui, the mutton-fat goddess was in charge of dealing with the official documents and secret military intelligence of Bodhisattva Rui. Back in her own tent, the mutton-fat goddess couldn't help but talk about some important military affairs with these men, and the top-secret documents she carried with her couldn't escape from the hands of these professional spies, who were sent by Gao. Why is it so messy? Gao could not help but grimace as he listened to Gao's report. In Diyu, keeping a woman in the army during a war was a capital offense, and it could even implicate one's own family. As for the fact that the woman he kept was openly keeping a gigolos, Gao was amazed. This Bodhisattva Rui was really open-minded, worthy of being the proud disciple of the Joyous clan. However, a man like him could make do with being a Buddhist cultivator, but could he really lead an army to war? Ji Hu and his brothers also grimaced and shook their heads at the same time. Gao flicked his fingers lightly. He no longer doubted the source of the intelligence Gao brought back. Although the source was a little bizarre, with the messy state of the Shizhou dynasty army, anything could happen. But his heart was heavy. Instead of trying to wipe out Yu Xiong army, they were trying to take control of it. There was a big difference between the two. In other words, among the higher-ups of Yu Xiong army, at least someone at the level of Si Jun was a spy of the Shizou dynasty. Otherwise, how could they take control of Yu Xiong army? Gao could figure out the reason why the Shizou dynasty suddenly made such a decision. With the 7 Buddhist patriarchs wounded, it was clear that the Buddhist League was impatient. They wanted to settle the overall situation on Panggu continent as soon as possible, and then focus on other things. It was not a small matter to injure the Buddhist patriarchs. If the Buddhist League could really take control of Yu Xiong army, Mianhu City would immediately become the bridgehead for the Shizou dynasty to attack Diyu. Beyond Mianhu City was the 9 Great Plains of the western region. Beyond the 9 Great Plains was Yu Xiong Plain, which was populated and rich in natural resources. With Yu Xiong army as the vanguard, it would be more than enough to sweep across the western frontier and push into Yu Xiong Plain. At that time, the Shizou dynasty could form a joint attack against Diyu from the east, south, and west. The eastern frontier of Diyu and the East Sea would hold back the Shizou dynasty's forces, and the southern frontier was also occupied by Great Wu, which had popped up out of nowhere, which prevented the Shizou dynasty from concentrating its full strength. But, if something happened to Yu Xiong army in the western frontier, it would immediately become a raging torrent. The Shizou dynasty's base was in the western frontier, and countless Shizou dynasty's troops could rush directly into the hinterland of Diyu and launch the deadliest attack on Diyu. No wonder the Shizou dynasty's attack is so weak these days. It's not only because of the news that the Buddhist patriarchs are wounded, but also because they want to make me lower my guard. Gao laughed and said, Gao, it's fortunate that we have you, or we would be in a passive position when they launch their attack. After pondering for a moment, Gao said in a deep voice, I want all the men of Divine Mastiff Battalion to keep a close watch on all the generals of Yu Xiong army. If they make any suspicious moves, kill them on the spot. Gao, you are in charge of this. The 4 of you will help Gao. Gao nodded. Then Ji-hu and his 3 brothers shouted out together. Gao glanced at the faces of Gao and his 4 sons, then narrowed his eyes. For some reason, he suddenly thought of King Xian Shan and King Li Shan, who had tried to assassinate Emperor Haozuan in the imperial palace of Liangzhu. His heart twitched violently. Gao was his adopted child, and he had adopted him by his side by a chance encounter. It was impossible for someone to do anything to him in that kind of situation. But what was inside the flesh of his 4 own children when he peeled open their flesh? Was it the supreme golden body of the Buddhist League, or the tranquil immortal body of the Tao League? Would his son, who was so respectful and submissive to him, stab him in the back in the next moment? Without Gao's warning, if he were tired of the weak and powerless attacks of the Shizou dynasty these days, would he be able to react in time if Ji-hu or the other 3 sons stabbed him in the back? Would that stab leave him a chance to survive? Gao shuddered. He suddenly felt that the cotton robe he was wearing was very thin, and he did not feel safe at all. The Buddhist League was not plotting to wipe out Yu Xiong army, but to take control of it. Back in the days when Liangzhu was in turmoil, Yu Xiong army was in big trouble. Nearly half of the soldiers were killed for participating in the rebellion, and thousands of powerful clans were involved in it. Who could guarantee that there were no Buddhist League or Tao League members hiding in the army now? Who could guarantee that the military minister and the left and right military ministers of the Yu Xiong army, the front, the back, the left, the right, and the center of the army, didn't have any surviving members who hadn't been killed back then? Who could guarantee that the generals in charge of the army were loyal to Diyu? Clearing his throat, Gao gently waved his hand. Gao, Ji-hu, and the others bowed to him and strode out of the back hall. Gao jumped to his feet at once. With a gloomy face, he paced back and forth in the back hall for a while, then transformed into a plume of dark smoke and came to a hall in the backyard. He entered the palace and casually threw a punch. The fist force whistled and blasted at an ancient bronze mirror floating in the middle of the palace. A pale green light poured out of the mirror, and before long, King Yang Shan's image appeared in it. Gao, what's the urgent matter that requires you to use this secret artifact? King Yang Shan looked in surprise at Gao, whose face was unsightly. Gao told King Yangshan about the military intelligence Gao had just received, and then told King Yangshan about his biggest worry. King Yangshan's face flickered as he remembered Ji Dai, who had been ordered by the human emperor to kill Wu Qi. "What do you want?" King Yangshan's face turned livid. "What's going on in the East Sea? If possible, I want the King of East Sea to help me." With a wry smile, Gao looked at his father in the mirror and said, "Compared with my own son, I'd rather believe in the King of East Sea." King Yangshan could not help but smile bitterly. Chapter 1044. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. In the chaos about 1,000,000 miles away from Pangu World, Wu Qi sat cross-legged on a 10,000 feet tall chaotic spirit mountain, drinking wine brewed from the spring in Yuanling Dark Realm and squinting at a vortex of energy thousands of miles in diameter in the chaos ahead. This swiftly spinning natural power whirlpool seemed to be an ordinary one among countless violent natural power whirlpools in the chaos, but as a chaos monster in his previous life, Wu Qi couldn't be clearer about all kinds of strange things happening in this natural power whirlpool. A five-colored light had been spurting out of this whirlpool, and a strong life force had been gathering in it. In the core of this whirlpool, there should be a mother body, and a chaos creature was hatching. Back then, in Wu Qi's previous life, Yuanling was born in Yuanling's nether realm like this. Therefore, Wu Qi had long been familiar with the special power vibration when a chaos creature was born. He took care of Qianshou and was on his way back to Pangu World when he suddenly sensed this strong life force. Therefore, he took a detour and came here to see what was going on. In Wu Qi's previous life, that was the peak period of the birth of chaos monsters. No one knew how many years had passed in the chaos, and there was no concept of time. However, within the time that Yuanling blinked his eyes, hundreds of chaos monsters would be born. Ever since Pangu created the world, perhaps the existence of Pangu World had affected the entire chaos, but it was no longer as prosperous as before. According to the Wahuang clan, only 2 to 3 chaos creatures would be born in the chaos every 3 to 5 eons, and these newborn chaos creatures were extremely weak, far less powerful than before. He grabbed a handful of dried fruits, broke them open, and threw them into his mouth. Then, he smiled and murmured to himself, "Let's see what this is." "Tsk, Ao Buzan already has a child, so I'm too embarrassed to take him as my mount. You must be handsome, so that I won't let you down after waiting for over half a month." Before his voice faded away, the 1,000 miles wide vortex of spiritual energy collapsed with a loud rumble. A shrill, long roar came from the core of the vortex. As soon as the roar entered Wu Qi's ears, he felt that his soul trembled, and his 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls nearly flew out of his 7 apertures. Wu Qi was taken aback. With his current cultivation base and the strength of his divine soul had firmly reached the level of Tao fusing realm. It was just that his magic power had not kept up, and he had not truly fused with the heavenly Tao of Pangu World. However, he was already one of the most powerful beings in Pangu World, even in the entire chaos. Nevertheless, this newborn chaos creature nearly took his soul away with a roar. What kind of cruel creature was this? However, there was no malice in that long roar. Instead, it carried the ignorant and naive aura of a newborn cub. It was just roaring out instinctively, but its roar was born with a special power that could take away people's souls, and this power was incomparably strong. Clicking his tongue in surprise, Wu Qi released the sky-covering flag and wrapped his entire body up. Layers of starlight stirred up and separated the chaos airstreams, then flashed across the air and reached the core of the disintegrating vortex. A 300-mile-wide, translucent black eggshell had already been broken into hundreds of pieces. A 500-mile-long, scorpion-like creature, with 9 long, pitch-black tails, coiled in the eggshell, and glowed brightly as if it were carved from diamonds, devouring the eggshell bit by bit. This should be a scorpion, right? In addition to his 9 long tails, he also had 4 huge pincers, which were busy picking up eggshells and stuffing them into his mouth. When he saw Wu Qi, his 9 tails, each measuring more than 300 miles long, immediately began to dance and aim their sharp hooks at Wu Qi's body, with a little bit of black, sticky venom oozing out of the hooks. Wu Qi glanced at the newborn with his divine sense. Although it had put on a ferocious look, the aura emanating from its body was one of extreme fear. It was like a newborn cub, full of fear towards Wu Qi. Slightly changing his mind, Wu Qi released a gentle stream of spirit power to cover this giant creature. He thought of old hens holding their nests, old dogs nursing their breasts, and the spirit powers of all kinds of creatures who had been reproducing. He simulated these spiritual fluctuations and teleported this big guy in one go. The huge black scorpion let out a few grunts, then carefully approached Wu Qi with its 9 tails and gently rubbed against his body. What a great strength! Even with just a slight rub, Wu Qi found it a little difficult to withstand this creature's tremendous strength. This creature was not only born with a whistling sound that could captivate one's soul, but also possessed a terrifying strength. Apart from the slightly weaker spirit power, which was roughly equivalent to that of an ordinary primordial immortal, its divine soul was strong enough to fight against a Tao-breaking expert in all other aspects. Even Yuanling in Wu Qi's previous life was not as strong as this creature, who possessed such a strength at birth. In just a few bites, it had eaten up all its eggshell, which was dripping with water and a little soft, but had quickly become extremely strong. He happily waved his 4 huge pincers and 9 long tails, stirring up a large number of afterimages in the void and shattering dozens of large chaotic stars in the vicinity. Complacently, the giant creature came before Wu Qi, reached out its pincers, and gave Wu Qi a friendly slap. Then, it smashed Wu Qi with its pincers. Even though he was protected by the heaven-veiling flag of chaos, Wu Qi was still thrown hundreds of miles away. This creature was too big and too strong. Rolling his eyes, Wu Qi smilingly took out a few spirit herbs that could nourish one's energy and strengthen one's fleshly body, then held them in his palm and said, "Little fellow, do you want these good things? If you do, you'll have to shrink your body and follow me. Follow me, and I'll guarantee you good wine and meat." The big fellow was taken aback. Abruptly, he came before Wu Qi, opened his mouth, which had a complicated structure and gave off a ferocious aura, and took a deep breath at the few spirit pills. These spirit pills were concocted by Wu Qi with the spirit liquid extracted from the pre-world divine tree in Yuanling's nether realm. They had a strong aroma and a strong effect, and were of great help to Wu Qi now, not to mention this newborn creature. The 500 miles long scorpion's enormous body gradually shrunk to 50 feet long, and its long tail was 30 feet long. Swaying its body proudly, its 9 tails coiled around Wu Qi's body, then it opened its mouthparts and swallowed the few spirit pills. A strong sense of power spread out from its body, while a joyful and friendly divine sense was quickly sent to Wu Qi. Wu Qi chuckled. Carefully, he released his divine sense and left his mark on the scorpion's simple and ignorant divine soul. Chaotic creatures were at their weakest when they were just born. As long as one wanted to, one could easily subdue them. But, given 3 to 5 months to familiarize themselves with the environment around them, no one would be able to subdue these unruly chaos-fiend gods, no matter how strong one's cultivation base was. What a fortune! TSK, you were right on the edge of Pangu world, but no one found you. Sitting down on the scorpion's broad, heavy, and extremely stable back, Wu Qi patted its shell and cried out, "From now on, you will be called 9 tails. It sounds like a fox, but you have 9 tails, don't you? 9 tails, open the way, and when we return to Pangu continent, I'll make sure you have a good life." 9 tails proudly wielded his giant pincers. While savoring the pleasure brought to him by the few spirit pills just now, he transformed into a bolt of black lightning and rushed towards Pangu world. This guy was incomparably violent. Along the way, no matter what kind of chaos power whirlpools or other terrifying chaos powers were in front of him, or all kinds of mountains and stars, he had been moving in a straight line, heading straight to Pangu world. Anything that stood in his way was easily crushed by him. The few spirit pills he had just taken were gradually playing a powerful role. His translucent body gradually became thicker and thicker, and the aura emanating from his body became more and more solid. His color changed from light black to darker and darker, but his body remained translucent. Rushing into Pangu world in such a domineering manner, Ninetails raised his giant pincers and roared towards the sky. A group of chaos-fiend gods appeared out of nowhere. With a roar from Ninetails, thousands of fiend gods were scared out of their wits. Ninetails excitedly pounced on this group of strange-looking fiend gods, raised her big pincers and stuffed them into her mouth. Predator. The corner of Wu Qi's eye twitched violently. He could not believe that Ninetails was a chaos fiend god known for his ferocity and brutality. Even among chaos fiend gods, he was notorious. This time, he had struck it rich. While he was happily enjoying Ninetails devouring the bodies of those unlucky chaos fiend gods, a jade ring in Wu Qi's sleeve suddenly vibrated violently. After a moment of hesitation, Wu Qi took out the jade ring carved with the image of a tiger treading on 1,000 mountains. This jade ring was given to him by King Yangshan when he first met him, allowing him to contact King Yangshan at any time. With Wu Qi's identity and status at that time, it was undoubtedly an honor to be able to contact King Yangshan's jade ring at any time, a privilege given to him by King Yangshan. But all this time, Wu Qi had relied on his own strength and adaptability, and had never used this jade ring. Later, the world changed too fast, and King Yangshan suddenly stood on the opposite side of Wu Qi, so he never looked for King Yangshan again. But now, it was King Yangshan who was looking for Wu Qi. After a moment of silence, Wu Qi pointed his finger at the jade ring. A plume of thick smoke rose from the jade ring, and King Yangshan's figure appeared in the smoke. King of East Sea. King Yangshan's face was very haggard. He looked at Wu Qi and said in a deep voice, "I've been waiting for you for a month." Wu Qi smiled bitterly. A month? He had been wandering in the chaotic world for more than a year, first tracking down the 7 Buddhist patriarchs, then dealing with Thousand Head, and finally returning to Pangu world, where he had wasted half a month with Ninetails. Something must have happened for King Yangshan to use the jade ring to look for him for a month. Sighing, Wu Qi nodded and said, "What do you have to say, Your Highness?" King Yangshan looked at Wu Qi with a complicated expression. After a long while, he said in a deep voice, "If it's about official business, there's nothing to say." Frowning, King Yangshan said, "If it's about personal business. Mianhu City and Liangzhu have been cut off for a month. Gao is leading the Yuxiong army to fight against the Shizhou dynasty. Over the past month, the Shizhou dynasty suddenly sent a very powerful man to seal off all contact between Mianhu City and the outside world. Gao was trapped in Mianhu City." Wu Qi suddenly remembered the first time he met Gao. He remembered the ups and downs he had gone through with Gao. After a moment of silence, his enormous divine sense quickly swept across the western border of Diyu. Chapter 1045. While Wu Qi was rushing back to Pangu world, great changes had taken place in Pangu world. The core experts of Dao League took action at the same time and wiped out all the fiend celestials in the 33 heavens in just 3 to 5 days. Almost all the core experts of the 33 heavens, such as the sect leaders of the 33 heavens, had a supreme treasure of primordial with them, and their true disciples each had a spiritual treasure of chaos. As for the other high-ranking disciples, almost all of them had a primordial immortal weapon or an innate spirit weapon to kill their enemies. The Dao sect had forcefully used their magnificent equipment to completely defeat those foreign fiend celestials who were so poor that they did not even have a pair of pants. Then, with a set of extremely powerful supreme treasure of primordial, the 12 heavenly cauldron divine beads as the core, Dao League set up a heavenly cauldron formation in the 33 heavens, making it impregnable. After that, the sect masters of the Dao sect personally took action and led a group of elite disciples to sweep through the starry sky. They took back a small portion of the outer starry sky and rescued a group of Dao sect immortals who were trapped in the outer starry sky. At the same time, the Buddhist League also used up all their resources. The secluded relic venerables, ancient Buddhas, holy spirits, and venerable kings were all mobilized. Their numbers were no less than Dao Leagues. All kinds of supreme treasures of primordial and chaos treasures were also produced, making the fiend celestials of the outer domains wail and flee. The Gridrakota mountain was easily conquered. In Yuanling's era, millions of Chaos Fiend Celestials were born with 1 or 2 or 3 treasures. The weaker ones were innate spirit weapons, while the better ones were Chaos treasures or even supreme treasures of primordial. Later, the Chaos Fiend Celestials fell one after another. When Pangu world was created, only the Wahwang clan, the 7 Buddhas, the 9 Taoists, and the 18 saints were left. Most of the fallen Chaos Fiend Celestials' natal artifacts were destroyed in the battles, but a small number were collected by the almighty experts who had survived to this day. In particular, the 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists, who had plotted the fall of many Fiend Celestials and even joined forces to kill them, were extremely wealthy. For example, Wu Qi was still working hard to collect the power of merit to refine the weapons of merit to arm his disciples, while the 7 Buddhas and 9 Tao Patriarchs could arm their disciples with all kinds of extremely powerful magic treasures. This was the difference in their foundation. Therefore, once the Buddhists and Taoists attacked with full force, the Fiend Celestials of the other realms who relied on their bodies and innate divine powers to fight were in for a bloody loss. Although they had caused great damage to the Buddhist sects and Taoist sects, it was not enough to threaten their peak powers. The Tao League did not make any moves after subduing the 33 heavens. But after the Buddhist League subdued the Great Vulture Mountain, they immediately sent 9 revered ones, 36 ancient Buddhas, 36 Buddhas, and a large number of kings, bodhisattvas, heavenly kings, almighties, and arhats to Panga continent, sealing off Mianhu city. The so-called World Exalted One was the existence with the highest status and the strongest cultivation base in the Buddhist sect other than the Gautama Buddha. All of them were Gautama Buddha's direct disciples. They had obtained the true teachings from Gautama Buddha and then imparted them to other direct disciples. Basically, they had the status of Dharma imparting elders in Buddhism. The so-called World Exalted Ones were those who had the mighty power to control a world and create a boundless universe. They were revered by all living beings in the world, and that was why they were called World Exalted Ones. Many worlds had been created in the Great Vulture Mountain, and these World Exalted Ones were the masters of those tranquil lands of Buddhism. They had a lofty status in the Buddhist League, and their cultivation bases had reached the high-end realm of Tao breaking. The 9 World Exalted Ones came to the outskirts of Mianhu city. They did not strike, but joined hands with other ancient Buddhas and Buddhas to construct a Vajra revolving formation, blocking all the messengers sent to Mianhu city from Liangzhu. The teleportation formations between Mianhu city and Liangzhu were also disturbed by their great power, so that no one could enter or leave the city. Now, 6 sacred emperors were 300,000 miles east of Mianhu city with Diyu, many supreme oracles, and revered elders of the secret palace, doing their best to fight against the Vajra revolving formation. But, with the 9 World Exalted Ones suppressing the formation with supreme artifacts of primal, how could the 6 sacred emperors break their formation? Mianhu city was besieged, but the army of the Shizo dynasty did not attack the city. The situation had become extremely strange. King Yangshan knew that the Shizo dynasty was, to put it bluntly, the Buddhist League that was plotting against the whole Yuxiong army. If those soldiers of Yuxiong army, whose cultivation bases were at least in the realm of second Panga heaven, submitted to the Buddhist League, the enormous power of faith they would provide to the Buddhist League would be an extremely terrifying thing. With the power of faith provided by these believers with powerful cultivation bases and abundant energy essence, the Buddhist League would be able to elevate at least dozens of ancient Buddhas to the level of World Exalted Ones. With that, the overall strength of the Buddhist League would skyrocket, and both the Tao League and Diyu would be at a disadvantage. More importantly, if the whole Yuxiong army betrayed Diyu and joined the Buddhist League, it would be a fatal blow to the morale of Diyu's army and people. That was why King Yangshan came to Diyu in such a hurry and asked Wu Qi to help. Although King Yangshan did not know Wu Qi's background, a man who could negotiate with the Wahwang clan and make a deal with him, and who could make the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan give him Kunwa swords, could not be an ordinary figure. What King Yangshan was worried about now was the safety of Gao and Yuxiong army. As long as they were safe, he would not hesitate to ask Wu Qi for help. Just as Wu Qi's divine sense swept across Panga continent, Gao was drowning his sorrows in wine in the great hall of the city lord mansion. The army of the Shizo dynasty did not attack the city, which was a good thing. But, the fact that Mianhu's city was cut off from the outside world was a bad sign. With the power of Deyu, the fact that all means of communication were cut off at the same time proved that the enemy's strength had completely suppressed the forces in Liangzhu. Otherwise, such a thing would never have happened. This proved that even the top experts of Deyu could not break through the enemy's blockade and infiltrate Mianhu city. What kind of terrifying expert would be able to do this? At least, Gao knew that 6 saint emperors were now in Liangzhu, and all of them had the cultivation bases of peak-level Tao-breaking experts. Since none of them could enter Mianhu's city to deliver the message, the Buddhist League must have sent experts of Tao-breaking realm who were stronger or more numerous than them. Gao picked up the wine cup and took a sip, then threw it to the ground and walked out of the great hall with his hands clasped behind his back. Standing on the steps outside the great hall, Gao glanced at the cloudy sky and sighed heavily. Then, he walked back into the great hall with his hands clasped behind his back, grabbed the wine jar, and took a gulp of the strong wine. The Buddhist League was after Yuxiong army. This army was not only large in number and formidable in combat strength, but more importantly, it was the symbol of Deyu. Before the 2 great upheavals in Liangzhu, Yuxiong army was the imperial army of Deyu. Once Yuxiong army was subdued by the Buddhist League, it was easy to imagine how great the impact on Deyu would be. Perhaps, the army would be utterly defeated, and Deyu would be completely wiped out by the Shizhou dynasty. Gao strode into the great hall. With a gloomy face, he cupped his fist at Gao and said, "Your Highness, the situation is not good." Sitting straight behind the table, Gao looked coldly at Gao and asked in a deep voice, "What's not good?" Gao gnashed his teeth and said, "Today, I brought my men and captured 7 bald donkeys in the city. They were spreading lies to deceive the people in the city. I tortured and tortured them, but no matter what I did, their bodies were not harmed at all." The corner of Gao's eye twitched. He pondered for a moment, and as he was about to give the order to behead the captured monks, Jihu and his 3 younger brothers hurried into the hall. "Father," cried Jihu breathlessly, "the morale of the soldiers under my command is not stable. Some people in the camp are spreading rumors that Deyu has lost his virtue and Shizhou dynasty is now the human emperor. A month ago, these rumors were spread by only 3 to 5 people in the camp, and I've already beheaded them all. But now, almost all the soldiers in the camp are saying the same thing. Father, what should we do about it?" Upon hearing Jihu's words, Gao was so angry that he smashed the wine cup on Jihu's head and bellowed, "You bastards! The morale of the soldiers is not stable. Why are you here instead of calming them down?" Gnashing his teeth, Gao knew that the assassins of Buddhist League were about to arrive. It had been a month since Mianhu's city was cut off from the outside world. Whatever tricks Buddhist League had up their sleeves, they should have used up by now. Judging by the fact that such rumors were spreading in Yuxiong army's camp, things were not looking good. The sky was dark. Dozens of huge candles as thick as an arm were lit in the hall, glinting brightly. Shadows could be seen jumping violently on the walls of the hall. Gao looked coldly at his 4 sons and asked, "Why are you here instead of calming the morale of the soldiers?" Jihu and the others exchanged a glance, then suddenly dropped to their knees at the same time. "Father," said Ji Bao in a deep voice, "the communication between Liangzhu and Mianhu's city has been cut off for a month, which shows that Liangzhu is powerless. Father, please." With a flash, Gao came in front of Gao. "What nonsense are you talking about?" he snapped at Jihu and the others who were kneeling on the ground. Jihu looked up at Gao and sneered, "We'll discuss it with father ourselves. What right do you, a bastard, have to speak here?" Jihu rose to his feet, ignoring Gao, who was standing in front of him, and said in a cold voice, "Father, the Buddhist League must subdue Yuxiong army. Every soldier in Yuxiong army has the cultivation base of second Panga heaven. Although their divine power is weak, their strength is amazing. As long as they give up the cultivation techniques of the human race and cultivate the divine power of the Buddhist League, within 3 to 5 years, they will become an invincible army of golden bodhisattvas." "You!" Gao glared at Jihu and snapped through clenched teeth, are you born bald donkeys of the Buddhist League, or did you only submit to the Buddhist League after birth? Ji Hu and Ji Bao laughed at the same time. Since your highness has asked, I, Monk Jingyi, offer my greetings, said Ji Hu in a deep voice. I am Monk Jingyuan, said Ji Bao with a smile. Ji Chao and Ji Lang laughed as well. They took a step forward and stood beside Ji Hu and Ji Bao, then suddenly struck out at the same time. Ji Hu and Ji Bao had their full attention on Gao, so they didn't manage to react in time and their heads were chopped off by Gao's axe. Ji Chao and Ji Lang sneered and threw out a talisman, crushing Ji Hu and Ji Bao's heads into pieces. Gao's 4 sons were fighting among themselves, and in just a blink of an eye, 2 of them had died. Gao and Gao were stunned. Chapter 1046. 300,000 miles east of Mianhu City, 9 revered Buddhas were sitting cross-legged on lotus thrones in the void according to the positions of the 9 palaces. Behind them were 36 ancient Buddhas whose bodies were green, and 36 Buddhas whose bodies were golden. Next to the ancient Buddhas and the Buddhas, thousands of bodhisattvas revealed their golden bodies and sat cross-legged on the lotus thrones, while countless arhats, vajras, heavenly kings, jidis, and other deities of the Buddhist League stood at attention. All the almighty experts of the Buddhist League were performing the Vajra Mudra with their hands and silently reciting the unbreakable Vajra mantra. A golden will of light, tens of thousands of miles in diameter, had surrounded them, and above it sat a Vajra, clad in a lotus leaf skirt and with his upper body glinting in a golden light. This Vajra was about 100,000 miles tall, and its entire body emanated an immeasurable amount of light that illuminated the void. Wherever the light reached, time and space froze, all spirit energies in the void were frozen, and all tangible and intangible existences were imprisoned. Flocks of birds froze in midair, unable to move, countless beasts froze in the woods, and all the fishes, shrimps, crabs, and loaches in the water were frozen as well. Flowers, grass, and trees were motionless, and even the pale green wind between them was frozen. Apart from the twitching lips of the almighty experts of the Buddhist League, everything in this void was completely frozen. With the sword of Qin Emperor in his hand, Yingzheng was hacking and slashing at the void from tens of thousands of miles away. Every time he swung his sword, a magnificent black dragon-shaped energy would come whistling out. The invincible sword Qi whizzed over. Once it fell into this part of the void, it suddenly shattered and disintegrated without any warning. The scene was like a piece of tofu smashing into a steel wall at an extremely high speed, shattering into pieces without leaving a single dregs behind. Yen Dan and the other 4 saint emperors, together with countless experts of Diyu, stood on a cloud platform, staring at the Vajra will formation in front of them with eyes burning with fury. The formation did not have any offensive power, and its only effect was absolute defense. It was based on the indestructibility of the Buddhist League, and combined the tremendous willpower of the 9 reincarnations, 36 ancient Buddhas, 36 Buddhas, countless bodhisattvas, arhats, and other Buddhist deities, together with the countless believers in their Buddhist kingdoms, and transformed it into the power of Vajra to seal the void with a mystic art of the Buddhist League. The defense of the formation could even withstand the attack of a Tao-fusing expert, and once it was completed, almost no one in the world could break it. Not only that, but it also used a supreme treasure of primal, Vajra Muni, could also form the core of the formation, but it also doubled its defense. No one could break it unless 4 or 5 Tao-fusing experts joined too. Of reincarnations. Yingzheng was venting the anger in his heart crazily, but no matter how he attacked, the formation remained unmoved. Beneath the 9 revered Buddhas, countless almighty experts of the Buddhist League were looking coldly at Yingzheng's futile and crazy attacks, their lips curved into an enigmatic, mocking smile. Even if you are the reincarnation of the sacred Emperor Zhuanqiu, even if you have the overall strength of a peak-stage Tao-breaking expert, you are just a mortal. Can you, a mortal, fight against gods and Buddhas? All the almighty experts of Buddhist League, including those weaker Vajras and Arhats, looked down at Yingzheng condescendingly. Mortal, what right do you have to fight against gods and Buddhas? A loud whistle rang out. A supreme oracle with a violent temperament roared furiously and cast out his supreme tower. The 100-mile-tall Supreme Tower spun rapidly, slamming into the Vajra revolving formation with a gust of chilly wind and ghost flame. A deafening rumble rang out, and the Supreme Tower was blown to pieces. Sticky black liquid gushed out of the Supreme Oracle's 7 apertures at the same time, and he slumped weakly onto the cloud platform. The Supreme Tower had turned into ashes, but it did not even touch the true body of the Vajra revolving formation. Yan Dan, Chu Ping, and the others stared at the freakish formation in exasperation, but there was nothing they could do. They had no idea what had happened to Mianhu City, but they were stuck here, unable to move. Moreover, some almighty experts of Buddhist League had cast a spell that could reverse the void, so anyone who tried to approach Mianhu City from the outside world would be sent directly to the front of the formation. They had sent out hundreds of reinforcements to take a detour to Mianhu City, but in the end, they all returned to the vicinity of the cloud platform. Yu Xiong army is in danger, murmured Wei Wuji gloomily. He clasped his hands behind his back and clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles made cracking noises. After this calamity, the human race will destroy the Buddhist League, he said in a gloomy voice. The few sacred emperors, including Chu Ping, who had the best temper, nodded with a gloomy face. After this calamity, if the Wahuang clan's calculation worked out, and the human race could control their own destiny, the Buddhist League would be completely destroyed. But, the most important task now was to break the Vajra revolving formation and rescue Mianhu City. Only heaven knew what was happening in Mianhu City now. Had Gao been killed by the traitor of Yu Xiong army? Or, had Yu Xiong army fallen into the hands of Buddhist League? In the minds of Yan Dan and the others, they would rather destroy Yu Xiong army themselves than let it fall into the hands of Buddhist League. If Yu Xiong army, with its huge number and formidable cultivation base, fell into the hands of Buddhist League, it would have a strong impact on the morale of Deyu's army and the people. They would rather destroy Yu Xiong army and falsely say that they were completely wiped out in the war with Buddhist League than let them surrender to Buddhist League. If we still can't break this formation in 3 days, I will destroy the area 1 million miles around Mianhu City, and let all the bald donkeys in that area be buried with Yu Xiong army, said Yan Dan, gritting his teeth and grinning coldly as he slowly clasped his hands behind his back and said, they should never have come to Panga continent. Now that they are here, they should be prepared to die. Ying Zheng, who was hacking wildly with his sword, put away the sword of Qin Emperor and flew back to the cloud platform. He snorted coldly and said, we should strike now. Wipe out all the living beings within 1 million miles around Mianhu City. Or, wipe out all the living beings in the entire territory of Shizhou dynasty at the same time. Even if there are some casualties, isn't the strongest function of the human race to have babies? The 5 saint emperors gave Ying Zheng a look, their eyes flickering at the same time. If we really want to use that method, we'll just have to wait for a few more leaders of Buddhist League and Tao League to come here, said Tian Wen in a gloomy voice. If only 3 to 5 people from Buddhist League and Daozu can come to Panga continent. We can't wipe them out, but we'll have to suppress them as well. While the saint emperors were venting their anger, the void next to them suddenly swirled, and a black 9-tailed scorpion, about 1,000 feet long and bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws, appeared in a sorry state near the cloud platform. Wu Qi lay sprawled on the back of the huge black scorpion, cursing words like bald donkeys. Yan Dan and the others were taken aback, and then they were overjoyed. The Buddhist League had deployed a void-reversing formation around Mianhu City, which would not prevent the intrusion of divine sense. Therefore, Wu Qi could easily see what was happening in the city. He happened to see Gao's 2 sons behead 2 of his brothers with axes. With his heart burning with anger, Wu Qi exercised a divine ability and hurried to the vicinity of Mianhu City. With his overall strength of a half-step Dao fusing expert, Wu Qi had consumed 90% of his magic power in just a moment, and he had teleported from the edge of Pangu world to a place 1 million miles above Mianhu City. After swallowing a few spirit pills to restore his magic power, he rode the 9 tails and sped toward Mianhu City. However, in his haste, he failed to discover the existence of the void-reversing formation. When he was less than 300,000 miles from the city, he was suddenly surrounded by darkness. When he woke up, he found himself in front of the Vajra revolving formation. Shaking his head, Wu Qi climbed up from the back of the Ninetails, looking a little embarrassed. The Ninetails, whose mind was also in a mess just now, let out a furious roar. He widened his eyes and let out a long howl at the Vajra revolving formation. A soul-stirring evil howl whistled through the air, but it hit the formation and bounced back. With a loud crash, tens of thousands of Dayu elites on the cloud platform rolled their eyes and fell to the ground. Their souls were swept out of their bodies by the howl. The supreme oracles brought here by Yen Dan and the others shrieked in fear. Hastily, they cast a mystic technique and forced the souls of these tens of thousands of elite warriors back into their fleshly bodies. Then, they poured some secret medicines into their mouths and hurriedly merged their souls with their fleshly bodies. Only then did they avoid a great loss for no reason. Wu Qi, snapped Yen Dan. What are you doing? Wu Qi shook his head and frowned as he looked at Yen Dan. He stamped his foot against the ground to signal the Ninetails to calm down, then flew up to the cloud platform and bowed to the 6 Saint Emperors one by one. He had no choice. Princess Zhangli had made Wu Qi marry 90,000 women from 6 dynasties, and all 6 Saint Emperors were his fathers-in-law. No matter how strong Wu Qi's cultivation base would be in the future, he would have to humble himself in front of these 6 Saint Emperors. After a quick conversation, Wu Qi understood what had happened, and he could not help but feel conflicted. The Vajra revolving formation was almost a cheat-like formation. Among all the great formations of Buddhist League, the Vajra revolving formation required the most manpower, and its power was the most monotonous. When 9 peak-level Tao-breaking experts put aside their skin and focused on defense, it was a real headache. Even though Wu Qi had obtained the blueprint of the Vajra revolving formation from Buddha Phutu, he could do nothing about it. It could even be said that the Vajra revolving formation was a rare, flawless formation in Panga world. It did not use any technique or change. All the power in the formation was gathered for defense. It was simple and pure, which made it very difficult to deal with. Especially when the formation core was guarded by a supreme treasure of primal-like Vajra Muni, it made the formation even more invulnerable. With a gloomy face, Wu Qi told the 6 Saint Emperors what he had seen with his divine sense, which made their faces turn even more unsightly. Although they did not know what had happened to Gao's son, now that 2 heads had been chopped off, would Gao's head be the next one to be chopped off? Damn baldies! Ing Zheng's eyes turned a horrible blood-red color. Grinning hideously, he said, "Let's do it. No matter how heavy the casualties are, let's kill these bald donkeys first." Hee hee, hee hee. With a flip of his palm, a fist-sized, pitch-black pearl appeared in Ing Zheng's palm. It emanated a suffocating aura that made Wu Qi's heart twitch and made him break out in a cold sweat. It was as if death was right before his eyes. Wu Qi gave Ing Zheng a look with difficulty. His instinct told him that the pearl had the power to severely wound a Tao-fusing expert. What the hell was this thing? Chapter 1047. What the hell is this? Wu Qi was taken aback by the pearl taken out by Ing Zheng. Staring at the black pearl, the corner of Wu Qi's eyes twitched. This was a freak. How could something like this exist in this world? A thing that could severely injure a Tao-fusing expert. Moreover, it seemed to be a single-use item, which meant that it was some kind of specially refined Yin Thunder. But, even an almighty expert of the Tao-fusing realm could not possibly refine something like this, could he? Wu Qi almost went crazy. Which almighty expert of the Tao-fusing realm would be so bored as to refine such a dangerous item? Once this pearl exploded, it would probably blow up almost half of Panga continent. The muscles on Ing Zheng's face twitched, making him look very ferocious. Standing next to him, Yen Dan drew a rune and sealed off the energy ripples emanating from the pearl. With a gloomy face, he too took out a pearl that looked exactly the same. Yen Dan gritted his teeth and said, "This is Panga continent, and this is, the Oblivion Thunder, refined with the destructive force brought by the great Saint Pangu when he created the world. It can annihilate everything when it strikes." Who refined this thing? Wu Qi was really going crazy. This thing was too dangerous. Wu Qi instinctively sensed that if he was accidentally struck by this thing, he would definitely be blown to pieces and his soul would vanish. Even if he protected himself with a supreme artifact of primal, he might not be able to withstand the power of this oblivion thunder. This was simply a cheating device that shouldn't exist in this world. Someone collected the destructive force brought by the great Saint Pangu when he created the world and refined it into the prototype of the oblivion thunder. Then, Her Majesty used the myriad spirit cauldron to remove 90% of its violent aura. It took her countless eons to finally form it. Chu Ping also pulled out a pearl and played with it in his hand. He blinked his eyes and murmured in a low voice, "Who do you think could collect this thing when the great Saint Pangu created the world?" Wu Qi understood. When the great Saint Pangu created the world, with that tremendous power, which chaos fiend god dared to approach? Pangu was the only one who could collect the power of destruction back then, and he was the only one who could create the prototype thunder. Since the Huang clan controlled the All-Spirits Cauldron, which was the original spirit treasure of Pangu world, it wasn't strange for her to have the thunder. Perhaps, Huang clan was the guardian of the entire Pangu world, chosen by Pangu. Otherwise, why would she take part in the creation of human beings, design the Tao and Buddhism, and even take out the thunder? Clearly, this was a trump card prepared by Pangu for Huang clan. If Ji Hao had hundreds of these, he could simply throw them to the 33 skies and Vulture Mountain, and the entire Pangu world would be peaceful. Other than the 7 Buddhas and 9 Taoists, the rest of the Taoists and monks were all dead. Wu Qi wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and asked with a gloomy face, "How many of these things are there?" The 6 saint emperors glanced at each other. Tianwen narrowed his eyes and said softly, "It's not a lot, but it's not a little either. There are at least 100 of them. However, the power of the thunder is too great. Once it is used without limit, a small half of Pangu world will be destroyed, and the hard work of countless eons will be wasted." Wu Qi's face turned even more unsightly. There were at least 100 of them. That was to say, there were probably more. How many other strange and dreadful things did the Huang clan have? Fortunately, the Huang clan was not a hysterical woman. Otherwise, Wu Qi could not imagine what would happen to the Tao and Buddhist League right now. Moving like a bolt of lightning, Wu Qi snatched the thunder from the hands of Chu Ping and the other 2 saint emperors, then shoved them into the small world inside his body. Ying Zheng and the other 2 saint emperors were taken aback, then grabbed Wu Qi and said anxiously, "Give them back now." "What are you doing with them?" Just now, Wu Qi had used a technique from the Scroll of Stealing. Although the 6 saint emperors had the same cultivation base as him, they did not see how he snatched the 3 thunderballs away. Wu Qi just smiled. He slapped his chest and said, "If I help you break the Vajra revolving formation, I'll take these 3 thunderballs as my pay. Give me some time, and if I can't break the formation, I'll give them back to you." With the first thread of innate thievery energy coiling around the 3 thunderballs, Wu Qi was frantically analyzing what they were. If he could devour and digest them, Wu Qi would be able to form the thunderballs with the primal purple energy in the future. If he could form hundreds or thousands of such powerful weapons, who would Wu Qi be afraid of? But, he had to be very careful when he was devouring them. If he was careless, the thunder might explode, and he would die without a burial place. Ying Zheng and the other saint emperors who grabbed Wu Qi were stunned, then said in unison, "A gentleman's word." Clapping his hands, Wu Qi laughed and said, "Don't worry, I'm a man of my word. Don't worry, I'm still trustworthy. Give me some time. If I can't break the Vajra revolving formation, I'll immediately return the 3 submerged thunders to you." Ying Zheng and the other 2 saint emperors immediately loosened their grip and cried out in a deep voice, "Be quick. We don't know what has happened in Mianhu City." Narrowing his eyes, Wu Qi flew out of the cloud platform and gave a loud whistle, summoning Ninetails, who was baring his teeth in midair and charging fiercely at the Vajra revolving formation. Sitting cross-legged on the back of Ninetails, the man and the beast slowly flew toward the Vajra revolving formation. Dark Yin Celestial Tower flew up from the top of Wu Qi's head. A vast amount of starlight swirled down and turned into a huge starlight vortex that covered an area of 1,000 miles. Within this area, Wuqi sped up the flow of time 1,000,000 times with all his might, but he had no other choice. He had no choice but to speed up, for he did not have enough time to break the formation. He had to do it as soon as possible, so that he could save Gao. After all, they were friends. Wuqi could sit back and watch Gao be sacrificed on the battlefield, but he should never die in the hands of his own son. Whether it was the Buddhist League or the Tao League, it was too despicable for them to kill Gao's son. As the starlight vortex slowly approached the Vajra revolving formation, countless almighty experts of the Buddhist League turned to look at Wuqi at the same time. The 9 revered Buddhas laughed at the same time. Another fool who overestimated his own strength. Not even the 7 Buddhist patriarchs could break the Vajra revolving formation alone. It was true that Wuqi had an amazing cultivation base, even stronger than the 9 revered Buddhas, but how could he possibly break the formation? Together with all the almighty experts of the Buddhist League, the 9 revered Buddhas chanted the Vajra mantra in a low voice. The humming sound of the mantra turned into a deafening roar of a heavenly dragon that shook the heaven and earth. The avatar hovering above the formation became more and more solid. It was glowing with a golden light as if it was cast from pure gold, and a swastika was spinning slowly between its brows. In the center of the swastika was a white relic about the size of a human head, which was none other than the supreme treasure of primal world, Vajra Muni. The closer Wuqi and Jiwei got to the Vajra revolving formation, the slower they moved. When they were only 100 miles away from the formation, Wuqi felt like a fly soaked in glue, struggling to move even with all his strength. Fortunately, the 9-tailed was extremely strong. His shell looked smooth and round, but in fact, there was a trace of sharpness on its surface. The air that was sealed around the great formation sliced across his shell, making a rustling noise that sounded like meat being cut by a sharp knife. It took Wuqi and Jiwei 6 hours to cover the last distance of less than 100 miles. Now they were outside the Vajra revolving formation, and less than 3 feet in front of them was the golden light wheel that protected the almighty experts of the Buddhist League. With great difficulty, Wuqi stretched out his hand and punched the light wheel. The light wheel did not budge at all, and Wuqi could only feel an explosive counterforce coming whistling towards him, going through his arm and smashing into his internal organs. A deafening rumble rang out from within Wuqi's body, as the counterforce shook his internal organs. His heart, liver, spleen, and lungs were ringing at the same time like a great bell. A tremendous sound wave spread out from his body, turning into white shockwaves that one could see with naked eyes and sweeping across the surroundings. The 9 revered ones in the core of the formation looked at Wuqi in surprise. The counterforce of that blow was enough to shatter an ordinary Tao-breaking realm zenith heaven golden immortal. Judging from the loud noise coming from inside Wuqi's body, it was obvious that the counterforce had shaken his internal organs. However, Wuqi didn't seem to be injured at all. This was simply impossible. This person is unfathomable. Disciples, do not be careless. The first era sovereign warned in a low voice. Many great figures of the Buddhist sects and Chi-Chi looked at Wuqi. But soon, they could no longer see Wuqi's figure. The torrent of silver starlight turned into a huge whirlpool, slowly spinning around Wuqi. The power of the stars and the power of the formation clashed against each other, producing a loud rumbling sound. The dazzling fiery light flickered rapidly, and Wuqi's entire body was wrapped in all kinds of flashes. The 9 world venerables used their Buddhist eyes to spy on Wuqi, but they couldn't see what Wuqi was doing. Activating 1,000,000 times time acceleration, Wuqi's recently recovered magic power rapidly flowed away. Time flew by, but the Vajra Revolution Array wanted to freeze both time and space. Wuqi accelerated time, and the array froze time. 2 opposing forces clashed against each other, and suddenly, a ripple appeared on the golden wheel. Wuqi spat out a mouthful of blood, and the great figures of the Buddhist sects inside the array were shocked. Their chanting voices suddenly rose by a notch. Shaking the Vajra revolving formation with the strength of a single person was something that had happened before, but that was only when a few Buddhist ancestors were practicing the formation. The 9 world venerables chanted the name of Buddha in unison, and the power of the array immediately rose by 30%. Time acceleration, time freezing. Wu Qi could make time flow 1,000,000 times faster, but at this moment, the speed of time within 1,000 miles around him was decreasing rapidly. 1,000,000 times, 900,000 times, 800,000 times. In just a short quarter of an hour in the outside world, the speed of time within 1,000 miles around Wu Qi had decreased to less than 1,000 times. Wu Qi pressed both of his hands on the Vajra Revolution array, transforming the small amount of grand mist purple energy in his body into the first strand of innate thieving energy, which kept seeping into the golden wheel. Wherever his hands touched the wheel, the golden wheel vibrated violently. Faintly, one could see wisps of golden Buddhist light flowing into Wu Qi's body. His magic power, which had been greatly consumed, was rapidly recovering. Wu Qi's divine sense had merged with the thieving energy, carefully seeping into the array inch by inch. Gradually, the time around Wu Qi accelerated, and his divine sense had already touched the core of the array, the Vajra Muni. Chapter 1048. In the main hall of the mayor's mansion in Mianhu City, Gao stared coldly at Ji Chao and Ji Lang, who had just killed his two elder brothers. Their heads rolled on the ground, and the blood gushing out from their necks was golden in color, emitting a faint scent of sandalwood, and even an ancient aura that came from a book made of linden leaves that had been lying on the ground for thousands of years. This was the unique aura of the blood of a hermit Buddhist cultivator. Clearly, Ji Hu and Ji Bao were the reincarnations of Buddhist cultivators. For a long time in the past, the Buddhist League had controlled the 6 paths of reincarnation through the netherworld. By paying a high enough price, the almighty monks of the Buddhist League could be reincarnated as members of the Dayu imperial clan, or even members of the noble clans. At first, these reincarnated people did not have good control over their cultivation base, so they were often killed right after they were reincarnated. Later on, the secret palace of Dayu discovered a secret technique that could detect whether a baby was a reincarnation of a Buddhist disciple through the energy reaction and all kinds of strange signs in their body when they were reincarnated. But later on, the Buddhist League made great progress in the technique of reincarnation. When the souls of those eminent monks were reincarnated, all their antecedents were erased, and the power they had accumulated through thousands of reincarnations was stored in the reincarnation. When they grew up, they only needed to be cleansed by the Buddha's light of guidance, and they would immediately awaken the wisdom of their previous lives. The Buddha's power that they had accumulated for thousands of lives would instantly be injected into their bodies, and they could even attract the golden body of Buddha that they had condensed in their previous lives, allowing them to obtain great divine abilities and great power in the shortest time possible. That was what happened to Ji Hu and Ji Lang. They had been by Gao's side for decades, and everyone thought they were reincarnated naturally. But today, it seemed that they were indeed disciples of the Buddhist League, and they had been cleansed by the Buddha light, regaining the wisdom and power of their previous lives. This strong golden blood carried such a strange fragrance. These two guys who claimed to be Buddhist monks should have a higher cultivation base than ordinary Buddhist bodhisattvas. They might even have half a foot into the realm of Buddha. Gao stared blankly at the two corpses on the ground, as if he was seeing Ji Chao and Ji Lang for the first time. He trembled for a while, then pointed his finger at Ji Chao and Ji Lang and growled in a low voice, "You! What are you?" He had killed Ji Hu and Ji Bao, who were almost at the level of Buddha, with a single swing of his axe, without giving them any chance to perish together, and had easily destroyed their souls. How could Ji Chao and Ji Lang be ordinary people? Looking at their methods and the dense immortal energy around them, one could easily imagine their origins. Ji Che grinned and slightly shook his body. His tall and sturdy body became much slimmer, and his clothes turned into a watercolored Taoist robe. Looking at Gao, Ji Chao, whose face had become handsome and ethereal, chuckled and said, "Gao, King Wei Shan. Greetings, Wuyo." Ji Chai pursed his lips into a teasing smile, then shook his head, sighed and said, "Prince, I have been pretending to be your son for 3 whole years, this is not a good feeling at all. If your highness cannot make the wisest decision, don't blame me for teaching your highness a lesson before I send you on your way." Ji Lang sneered as well. With a sway of his body, he transformed into a stout Taoist clad in a red Taoist robe. Shaking his head, he looked at Gao and said with a smile, Tianji, have been pretending to be your highness' son for 1 year and 6 months. He, when I address you as father, it is very intimate. Your highness. Do you understand? Gao smiled and shook his head gently. How could he not understand? Daoist Wuyo and Daoist Tianji were pretending to be Gao's sons by using the art of possession. Those who could cast such a spell without being detected by the supreme oracles must be primordial immortals of Tao League, and almighty experts who specialized in soul-related mystic arts. Only they had the means to silently devour the souls and original spirits of 2 people. At the same time, their every move and every word did not reveal any flaws, and they could 100% pretend to be someone who had been possessed by them. This method was even worse than that of the Buddhism League, and it was even more impossible to guard against. The Buddhism League had a mystic art to detect the reincarnation of a person, and it could occasionally find out a few unlucky fellows who did not conceal their origins well. But, possession relied on the power of a soul 1 trillion times stronger than that of an ordinary person to devour the soul of the possessed person, then destroy the person's soul and replace him. This was simply impossible to guard against. For the upper echelons of Dayu who practiced the cultivation techniques of the human race, except for the great oracles of the Directorate of Celestials and the Secret Palace, and those high-ranking warriors who were protected by the divine souls of powerful divine beasts, no one else could resist the art of possession. Furthermore, these primordial immortals did not practice the magic of the 5 elements or the mystic arts of earth, water, fire, or wind, but the divine abilities and mystic arts of the soul. Therefore, they did not even need their own bodies, as they could casually pick a fleshly body to unleash their strongest power. That was how Wuyo and Tianji worked. One had been by Gao's side for 3 years, and the other for 1 year and 6 months, but even Gao, their father and the closest person to them, did not notice anything unusual about them. Even Ji Hu and Ji Bao did not notice anything unusual about them, which was why they were beheaded by Wuyo and Tianji today. Gao clasped his hands behind his back and murmured in a low voice, "So, my 4 sons are all gone?" Wuyo sighed softly and looked at Gao with a little pity. "Indeed, your highness, why were you born in the clan of Dayu? If your highness were a coward and incompetent man, you could still have a house full of beautiful wives and children. But, your highness, you have such means and strength. You can't blame us for that." Gao nodded at Wuyo and said coldly, "What you have done is too despicable. You have disregarded the natural order of the world, and you will get what you deserve." Wuyo laughed again and said, "What do you mean by what you have said, your highness?" "The punishment of the heavenly Tao." "But, we are all protected by the boundless virtues, so why would the heavenly Tao punish us? Besides, they are the reincarnations of 4 bald donkeys from the Buddhist League, pretending to be your highness's sons. They have nothing to do with us. All we did was devour the souls of 2 bald donkeys, nothing else." Gao panted heavily as he took 2 steps back and looked warily at Wuyo and Tianji. Gao did not give an order, so he did not move. It was not easy to deal with people like Wuyo and Tianji, and no one would attack them rashly. Gao exchanged a look with Wuyo and Tianji. After a long while, Wuyo said in a low voice, "Your Highness, please give the order to kill all the Buddhist rebels in Yuxiong army, and then submit to Tao League. Right here in Mianhu City, right here, Tao League founded the Ling dynasty, and Zhang Tingjiao, a member of the imperial clan of the Ling dynasty, is the emperor of the Ling dynasty." He let out a strange laugh and said in a gloomy voice, "It is only a day's journey from here to Kamheart city of the Shizo dynasty, and Yuxiong army can raze the city to the ground with just 1 charge. If your highness can help us accomplish this great feat, in the future, your highness will be the divine king of all the Tai Huang Xingtian tribes in the 33 heavens on the list of investiture of the gods. In other words, your highness will be the lord of the Huang Xingtian tribes in the future." "The lord of the Huang Xingtian tribes?" Gao laughed, rocking back and forth as he cried out, "My 4 sons are exchanged for an illusory title of heavenly king? He, are you trying to be the lord of the 33 heavens?" Wuyo and Tianji paid no attention to Gao's words. Tianji laughed and said, Of course, we already have a candidate for the position of Lord of the 33 Heavens, and, before he could finish, Gao's face had turned deathly pale. There is someone else colluding with you? Wuyo and Tianji exchanged a glance, then Wuyo said with a smile, Your Highness is indeed wise. You can see many things from the titles we Dao League have set up. It's true that Yu and a few other kings have accepted the rewards from Dao League, and their status is no lower than Your Highness. Their status was no lower than Gao's? Was it referring to their current titles in Yu, or their future positions in the Celestial Court? If it was only their future positions in the Celestial Court, it would not matter. But if it meant that their current positions in Yu were no lower than Gao's, what did that mean? Among the kings of Dayu's council, there were some who were colluding with Dao League. These traitors who couldn't be killed, couldn't be completely killed. Gao clenched his fists tightly and said through clenched teeth, Are you Dao League fools or fools? The Buddhist League has set up a formation to cut off all the passages in and out of Mianhu City. So what if you Dao League have subdued Yuxiong army? Do you think you can lead Yuxiong army to attack Calming Heart City from here? Wuyo and Tianji exchanged a smile again. With a treacherous smile on his face, Wuyo said in a low voice, Why does Your Highness need to worry about the Vajra revolving formation? It's true that the formation is powerful, but in our opinion, it's just a piece of cake. As long as Your Highness can help us subdue Yuxiong army, Your Highness can just wait for the immortal blessings in the future. Gao glanced at Wuyo, then at Tianji. Suddenly, he snapped, pulled out a 3-feet-long machete carved from black jade from his waist, and swung it down at Wuyo's head. The machete was engraved with dozens of ghost skulls of various sizes. As the machete cut through the air, these ghost skulls bared their teeth and wailed as if they were alive. The shrill cries made both Wuyo and Tianji tremble. This was the soul blade, crafted by Yu, a weapon that could restrain the immortal souls of immortals. As Gao made his move, Gao let out a furious howl and swung his sword at Tianji's neck. Gao burst into laughter and said, Good Gao. Let's join hands and kill these bastards. Avenge your 4 brothers. A loud boom rang out. Wuyo and Tianji did not move, but Gao was knocked flying away, coughing up a mouthful of blood. Gao, who had just swung his sword at Tianji, stabbed it into the ground and slowly shook his left fist. It was he who had pulled back his sword at the last moment and punched Gao with all his strength. Gently shaking his neck, Gao walked slowly to Gao, who lay motionless on the ground for a long time, then gave Gao's head a heavy kick. You ungrateful fool. I've been pretending to be your filial son and grandson for hundreds of years, and now I have to reap some rewards. Gao kept kicking Gao's chest and abdomen, breaking his ribs one by one. Gao stared at Gao in disbelief, completely stunned. Chapter 1049. The Great Spirit Vulture Mountain was known to the world as the Great Spirit Vulture Mountain. It was formed by 7 great mountains, each of which was the mother body of one of the Buddhas in the chaos. These 7 mountains were the most powerful prime magical treasures of the 7 Buddhas, and they formed the foundation of the Buddhist League. However, few people knew that at the end of the 7 great mountains, in the boundless void, there was a mysterious withered heart cave. Although it was called a cave abode, it was actually 10 times larger than the 7 great mountains of the Great Spirit Vulture Mountain combined. It was basically a small world that was independent of Panga world. The quality of the natural energy here was only slightly inferior to that on Panga continent, but because only a few almighty experts of the Buddhist League were qualified to cultivate in the Withered Heart Cave, the total amount of natural energy accumulated in the cave was very impressive. Not to mention that this place was filled with clear springs and golden lotuses, not to mention that this place was filled with verdant hills and limpid waters, and not to mention that this place was filled with all sorts of wondrous plants such as the Langxian jade tree that only occasionally appeared on the Kunlun mountain. Just the 7 7-story Buddhist pagodas that stood towering at the core of the Withered Heart Cave emitted a primordial and lofty aura. Looking at the material of the pagodas, they were clearly refined from white bones. The 7 pagodas were refined from the bones of each of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs, forming this 7 Buddha heart-locking formation, which was used to suppress the withered heart cave. The 7 pagodas were crafted with their own bones. Such a huge investment had made the withered heart cave the safest place for the Buddhist League. At least, since the creation of Pangu world, even the 9 Daozu did not know that the Buddhist League had such a secret base. Surrounding the 7 pagodas were 63 so-called revered ones of the Buddhist League, who possessed the cultivation base of Tao-breaking realm. No one knew about these 63 revered ones. Even the current Lord Buddha, Amitabha, did not know that there were 63 almighty experts of the Buddhist League hiding in the withered heart cave. 63 world venerables formed a lotus-like devil-suppressing formation with the pagoda as the core. Faint chanting of Buddhist scriptures spread in all directions, causing the entire withered heart cave to tremble along with their chanting. The blood was as viscous as ink. When it landed on the ground, it was still wriggling like a poisonous snake. It was obvious that the evil power of 1,000 heads had invaded his body. The other 6 Buddhist ancestors casually raised their hands, and a beam of Buddhist light wrapped in golden Buddhist flames sprinkled down, burning the blood arrow cleanly. With a wry smile, Buddha guarding heart took out a few secret Buddhist pills and ate them. Then, he asked in a low voice, "How's the situation in Mianhu city?" Buddha guarding heart smiled faintly and said, "The Vajra formation has been laid out, with Vajra Amitabha as its core. No one can break it unless those few shameless ones strike in person. We've already planted so many people in the city. As long as that King Wei Shan, Gao, submits to us, the entire Yuxiong army will be in our hands." Guarding heart smiled contentedly and breathed a sigh of relief. Subconsciously, his weak divine sense swept toward the direction of Mianhu city on Pangu continent, and his unsightly face suddenly turned deathly pale. Guardian heart angrily slammed his palm on the ground and shouted, "Where's attendant golden mist?" A fragrant breeze drifted by, and then a handsome young man, standing 6 feet tall, with a body as white as ivory and a pair of eyes shining like golden stars, strode out of the breeze, holding a pestle measuring 12 feet long with both hands. Attendant Jin Lan bowed slightly to guarding heart and cried out in a deep voice, "Buddha, I, Jin Lan, am here. May I know what is your decree?" Buddha guarding heart said nothing. He pointed a finger in the direction of Mianhu city on Pangu continent, then opened his mouth and spat out a relic about the size of a thumb, glinting so brightly that no one could look at it directly. Inside of it, there seemed to be countless worlds hidden in the relic. Buddha guarding heart gave a soft snort as he handed the relic, which he had spent a great deal of time condensing, to attendant Jin Lan. The other 6 Buddhist ancestors also sent their divine sense in the direction of Mianhu city, and what they saw made their faces flicker at the same time. These days, they had been busy helping Buddha guarding heart heal, and they had no time to spend on trivial matters in the outside world. But all of a sudden, such a big problem had happened. 2 of the 4 Buddhist League cultivators they had planted around Gao had been possessed by primordial immortals who specialized in cultivating the mystic arts of souls from the Tao League. How shameless! The 6 Buddhist ancestors growled in unison. If it had not been for the ambush set up by Huang clan in advance, and the fact that Tao-fusing experts were strictly prohibited from participating in the investiture of gods, they would have attacked the Daoyuotian cultivators. This was simply too shameless. Did they think it was easy for the Tao League to plant 4 spies through the Tao of transmigration? How could the Tao League be so unreasonable as to possess the bodies of these spies? This was too unskillful. The 6 Buddhist ancestors stared at attendant Jin Lan with bright eyes. This was the first time he had received so much attention from so many Buddhist ancestors, and he could not help but break out in a cold sweat. Hastily, he took the natal relic condensed by Buddha guarding heart, then transformed into a gust of fragrant wind and sped toward Pangu continent. Attendant Jin Lan knew what Buddha guarding heart meant. With this natal relic, he could fuse it into the Vajra Amitabha formation outside Mianhu city, transforming the defensive formation into a huge barrier. Within the coverage of this barrier, all Taoist magic and immortal magic could not be used, and the power of the divine abilities of the Buddhist League would be increased by more than 100 times. With this, even if the Tao League had countless men lying in ambush in Mianhu City, they would have no choice but to surrender and let the disciples of the Buddhist League kill them at will. Yu Xiong army was related to the Buddhist League's great plan of conquering Diyu. How could they allow this army to fall into the hands of the Tao League? Along the way, attendant Jin Lan rushed to Pangu continent in a hurry. But, before he arrived at Mianhu City, a great change had taken place. Inside the city, Daoist Wuyo and Daoist Tianji burst into laughter. Daoist Wuyo nodded and said, "Your Highness, we have plenty of time to discuss some issues. As for those bald monks outside the city, they are not worth mentioning." Gao. "Oh, no, eldest senior brother Godly Hunter, please use more strength. He will not yield if you don't use some strength." Gao's pupils constricted. He barely managed to raise his arms to block the fierce kick from Godly Hunter, who had possessed Gao for hundreds of years. A crack rang out, and Gao's arms were broken. He grunted as Godly Hunter's foot landed on his chest, causing him to spray a mouthful of blood into the distance. Laughing out loud, Daoist Divine Hunter squatted down and slapped Gao again and again. Daoist God Hunter's slap was so strong that even with Gao's cultivation base, there was no way he could withstand it. Soon, his cheeks were swollen, and the skin on his cheeks cracked. Blood sprayed into the air along with the slaps. "Father, Gao, King Wei Shan, you bitch," said Godly Hunter in a ferocious voice. Clutching Gao's neck with both hands, he said in a cold voice, "If you don't cooperate with us, then, you will die." A strange smile appeared on Gao's face as he stared at the sky outside the door and said coldly, "You have killed the spy planted by the Buddhist League around me. You have sabotaged the Buddhist League's plan to subdue Yu Xiong army. There is a Buddhist League formation outside that has sealed off the void. You have nowhere to run." Daoist Tianji laughed. With a flick of his finger, he threw out a talisman. A green talisman, no more than 3 inches long, shot out into the sky and exploded into a blinding green light, condensing into a huge green lotus that swayed left and right in the wind. The green lotus radiated a dazzling green light that could be seen from hundreds of thousands of miles away. Wu Qi's divine sense had just penetrated the core of the Vajra formation and was carefully seeping into the Vajra Muni. Under Wu Qi's divine sense, the true face of the Vajra formation, which was almost a cheat in defense, was revealed to him. With the Vajra Muni as its core, the Buddhist energy of the 9 revered ones, 36 ancient Buddhas, 36 Buddhas, and the power of countless Bodhisattvas, Arhats, Vajras, and heavenly kings, all combined into a golden Muni pearl that hovered in the sky. The 9 revered ones surrounded the Vajra Muni in the 9 palaces formation. In the middle of them, a beam of white light shot out from the top of the head of one of the revered ones, which carried a white lotus, and the Vajra Muni hovered in the middle of its pistil. The Buddhist energy of all the Buddhist League's sacred beings had been refined and purified by the Vajra Muni. In order to break the formation, one must destroy the Vajra Muni pearl and all the sacred beings guarding the formation at the same time. This was something that even the few Buddhist patriarchs could not do, let alone the others. Carefully exploring the formation with his divine sense, Wu Qi racked his brains, trying to find a way to cause some trouble to the formation. Inside the golden Vajra Muni pearl was a vast and boundless void. All the sacred Buddhist energy of the Buddhist League had transformed into a huge golden whirlpool in this round space, constantly fusing into the core of the Vajra Muni pearl. The core was like a black hole, absorbing and spitting out an immeasurable amount of Buddhist energy, transforming it into a strange and extremely hard energy that filled the entire formation. Wu Qi was like a tiny sesame seed at the edge of a vast ocean, staring blankly at the boundless raging tide of Buddhist energy. His power alone could not pose any threat to this flawless vortex of Buddhist energy. Although his cultivation base had reached the level of Tao fusing realm, his magic power and cultivation base were even weaker than an ancient revered one of the revered ones of the Buddhist League. After all, how many years had Wu Qi been cultivating in this life? There was no way he could compete with these almighty experts of the Buddhist League, who had cultivated for several hundreds of thousands of eons. After staring blankly at the raging tide of Buddhist energy for a long time, Wuqi gritted his teeth and was about to use the technique in Scroll of Stealing to forcibly extract the Buddhist energy and transform it into his own magic power. But, the raging tide of Buddhist energy was too huge. With Wuqi's current cultivation base, he was like a little mouse trying to eat a mountain, and if he was not careful, he might be crushed by the mountain. Just as Wuqi was about to make his move, the green talisman soared into the sky, and the huge green lotus drifted in the sky. Among the 9 revered ones of the Buddhist League sitting cross-legged in the Vajra Muni Pearl, 3 of them suddenly laughed at the same time and said, "Excellent, excellent. The truth has finally come to light." The golden bodies of the 3 revered ones disintegrated, and dozens of white natal relics, each the size of a rice bucket, soared into the sky. They emitted a blinding light, then turned into a faint rain of light that drifted down from the sky. The natal relics vanished in a puff of smoke, and 3 immortal souls shrouded in purple mist and golden light slowly emerged from the rain of light. 3 enormous purple jade talismans, each 360 miles long, shot out from the bodies of the 3 immortal souls, smashing onto the Vajra Muni Pearl amidst countless electric arcs. Suddenly, the vortex of Buddhist energy inside the Vajra Muni Pearl became stagnant, and then it flowed backward with a boom. Wild with joy, Wuqi immediately sent all his divine will into the vortex of Buddhist energy. Chapter 1050. Sect leader Miao Yuan cried out in astonishment, "Are you saying that there are Buddhists in Palace of Dao Yuan?" The Buddhist League had sent out 9 world venerables to arrange the Great Vajra Amitabha formation, but 3 of them had suddenly disintegrated their golden bodies and self-destructed their natal relics. From the disintegrated golden bodies and relics, 3 Taoist immortal souls came out. Moreover, they had launched a suicidal attack, abandoning the enormous immortal energy contained in their immortal souls and reversing the formation's core, turning the whole formation into a mess. In Palace of Dao Yuan, the 9 Daozu exchanged a glance and smiled. Purple-browed Daozu slowly rose to his feet and pointed at a Daoist, who was sitting not far away from him, clad in a purple robe with golden edges and a large golden 8 trigrams embroidered on his chest. This Daoist also had the cultivation base of Dao-breaking realm. He was the famous sect leader Miao Yuan, among the sect leaders of the 33 Heavens of Dao League. His immortal magic was extremely powerful, and his artifact crafting technique was known as the best in Dao League. Now, they had simply abandoned their golden bodies and relics, which they had acquired through countless years of arduous cultivation in the Buddhist League. As Yuan Ling had been sucked into the list of deification, there was no need to keep this list a secret anymore. After Yuan Ling was sucked into the list of deification, purple-browed Daoist stood up and pulled out Daoist Miao Yuan. He had the intention of killing the chicken to scare the monkey. Taking a deep breath, purple-browed Daoist sighed faintly and said, "After countless eons of arduous cultivation, they have also become revered ones, holding a high position and great power in the Buddhist League. Fortunately, they still have a filial heart. After so many years, they haven't forgotten us, the few masters and seniors who taught them." The sect leader pointed his finger out, and a 3-inch-long immortal weapon, which looked as if it were made of crystal, silently pierced through Daoist Miao Yuan's forehead, destroyed his immortal body, and pierced through the core of his immortal soul. Daoist Miao Yuan gave Daoist Long Eyebrow a cold smile and said, "What are you talking about, Daozu? We only seek victory, regardless of the means. Isn't this what the few Daozu always say?" Ha, if the 3 world venerables Universal Era, Huasher, and Yuansher, weren't from Daozu, how would you know my identity? How many spies could there be in the Dao sect who could become a true disciple of Daozu? Getting rid of one of them was no less than cutting off an arm of a few Buddhas. It was equivalent to getting rid of a big problem for the Dao sect. Zimei Daozu explained the cause and effect of the matter. 3 spiritual lights flashed in the list of deification. The 3 powerful figures of Haotian Taoism who had just disturbed the Vajra Amitabha formation and destroyed the arrangement of Buddhism also told their fellow disciples how they got the list from the list of deification. In addition, Daoist Miao Yuan had obediently put on his kasaya and revealed his bald head. The many mighty figures of the Dao sects in the primordial Dao palace sighed softly. The world venerables of Buddhism were equivalent to the great sect masters of the 33 heavens of Tao sect. There were actually 3 world venerables who were spies of Tao sect. This shocking scene was naturally seen by all the mighty figures of Tao sect in the primordial Tao palace. Hearing Taoist Purple Eyebrow's question, sect master Miao Yuan hurriedly cupped his hands and said, "I saw it. I really didn't expect that the Daozu's supernatural power was so great that they were unpredictable. Even among the world venerables of Buddhism, there are fellow Taoists hidden." This list was a top secret in Buddhism. Except for the 7 Buddhas, only a few of the Buddha's loyal confidants knew the details. Recently, Buddhism suffered the calamity of the fiend god from the outer domain. The great vulture mountain was in a mess, and the 7 Buddhas were in seclusion in the withered heart cave to heal their injuries. Buddhism was without a leader, and the 3 world venerables were lucky enough to get this list. The Daozu glanced at each other and sighed at the same time. Taoist Miao Yuan smiled, looked at Taoist Purple Eyebrow, nodded, and said, "Daozu, today I will call you Uncle Master for the last time. Tao sect is powerful, but Buddhism is destined to be the master of this world. You have fallen into the Buddha's trap and lost. Tao sect, why don't you submit to Buddhism and join forces? In the future, there will be many benefits for you, Daozu." Staring at sect master Miao Yuan, Purple Eyebrow nodded and said, "Yes." Just now, the 3 fellow Taoists who sacrificed countless eons of cultivation to destroy the formation in the Vajra Amitabha formation are the senior brothers of all the disciples here. Long before you joined Tao sect, they were ordered to sneak into Buddhism. Taoist Purple Eyebrow and the other Daozu could not help but burst out laughing. Even green-browed Daozu, who was in the worst mood, could not help but burst out laughing. Sitting next to Taoist Long Eyebrow, green-browed Daozu closed his eyes. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly, and then his face, which was as round and fair as an ancient moon, became as lifeless as an ancient well, without any change in his expression. Sect Master Miao Yuan was one of green-browed Daozu's true disciples. Shaking his head gently, green-browed Daozu said coolly, "Kill his immortal body and immortal soul, and leave his Yuanling to enter the list of deification. Since he advocates for Buddhism so much, spare his life, and let us see how Buddhism declines. In the future, when the celestial court is conferred the title of deification, we will confer him a lowly position, so that he will regret what he did today." The 9 Daozu sighed in unison, shaking their heads at the same time. Taoist Long Eyebrow said coldly, "The Huahuang clan is indeed vicious, but compared to those few bald thieves, they are even more despicable." Spitting loudly, Taoist Long Eyebrow cursed in a low voice, "They are not even as good as a woman. These few bald thieves are really despicable." Sect Master Miao Yuan remained silent, staring at Taoist Purple Eyebrow. But, as soon as Ming Guang appeared, the 7 sect masters in front of him cried out at the same time, and a large cloud rose from the top of their heads. Purple, golden, cyan, white, and red lotuses with 5 colors burst out from the cloud. With the combined power of the 7 of them, together with the various powerful restrictive spells in the Palace of Tao Origin, they forcibly sealed the enormous immortal energy that was about to explode inside Taoist Miao Yuan's body. Taoist Purple Eyebrow sighed softly, then straightened his waist and cried out, "Quickly subdue the Yuxiong army in Mianhu City, and announce this to the whole realm of Deyu. Tell them that the human emperor of Deyu is tyrannical, and that Yuxiong army has submitted to the new emperor, Liu Bang, and will certainly plead for the human race and create another glorious era." The thousands of almighty experts in the Palace of Tao Origin received the order in unison, and hundreds of them immediately walked out of the palace. Those who could sit quietly in the Palace of Tao Origin were the top almighty experts of the Tao League. The 33 heavens of the celestial court were guarded by 3 great sect masters of Tao-breaking realm every day. Together with their subordinate sects and the many experts in their sects, the thousands of people in the Palace of Tao Origin had at least the cultivation base of Tao reasoning realm. With their overall strength, it was easy for them to spy on everything on Pangu continent with their divine sense. That was why they had all seen the unusual change outside Mianhu City just now. After a long silence, Daoist Miao Yuan's purple-gold Daoist robe quietly tore apart, and amidst a flickering golden light, a pale golden kasaya draped over his body. The bun on his head fell off silently, revealing a big bald head. He put his palms together and bowed to Daoist purple eyebrow, then recited the name of Buddha and sighed in a low voice, Daozu, I'm Gue Yuan. It's easy to explain. It's just that when Daozu were crafting the investiture of the gods, I added some ferocious soul stones into it. Sect Master Miao Yuan was the main assistant of the 9 Daozu in refining the investiture of the gods. Had it not been for his profound ability in artifact crafting, and his endless wonderful ideas, the 9 Daozu might not have been able to successfully refine the investiture of the gods. Even if the result was a defective product, it was, after all, the investiture of the gods, and it was working now, wasn't it? Green Eyebrow Daozu gritted his teeth and said, instead of being the sect master of the Dao League, you chose to be a traitor. Then I'll let you be ordered by the Divine Lord of Universe in the future, and be the lowliest official for the rest of your life. Daoist Purple Eyebrow fixed his eyes on Sect Master Miao Yuan as well. The atmosphere in the Palace of Dao Origin became extremely strange, suffocating like a graveyard at night. After a full 2 hours, Daoist Purple Eyebrow sighed softly and said, Miao Yuan, you played a great role in refining the investiture of the gods. It's your credit that you were able to refine the investiture of the gods into what it is today, so that your master and all your uncle masters could only suppress the investiture of the gods with their souls, right? How did you do it? When the 3 revered Buddhas, who had just destroyed their Dharmakaya and natal relics, exhausted all the power of their immortal souls to reverse the Vajra Amitba formation, they had used a secret art of the Dao League to send back some of the secret information they had learned. Among them were the names of several core spies of the Dao League, including Sect Master Miao Yuan. With a soft sigh, the 7 sect masters in purple robes, Chi-Chi stood up and stood in front of Daoist Miao Yuan. One of the sect masters said in a deep voice, how can a mere demon monk Gue Yuan be worthy of Daozu's personal attack? Aren't you overestimating him too much? Demon monk Gue Yuan, surrender and listen to Daozu's punishment. Daoist Purple Eyebrow laughed and nodded. Yes, my 9 brothers and I have been competing with those 7 bald thieves for countless years, and we have also placed many trusted disciples in each other's disciples. Whether it is us or the 7 bald thieves, we have done everything possible to strictly examine our first disciples, true disciples, and inner disciples. But there are always fish that slip through the net. Daoist Purple Eyebrow sighed, shook his head, and said, just now, outside the city of Miaohu, the Vajra Amitba formation of the Buddhist League was broken. You have all seen it. With a long sigh, Yuan Ling flew out of Daoist Miao Yuan's body. The investiture of the gods released a strong golden light that enveloped Yuan Ling and swallowed him into the investiture of the gods. Sect Master Miao Yuan rose to his feet in confusion. He cupped his fist and bowed to Daoist Purple Eyebrow, then asked respectfully, what can I do for you, eldest uncle? Daoist Miao Yuan gave a long laugh. A bright light burst out of his body, and he was ready to self-detonate. His heart was as clear as a mirror. In front of the 9 Dao ancestors, he had no chance to escape at all, not to mention a life-and-death struggle with the other almighty figures of Dao sect. The best choice he could make now was to self-detonate, so that he would not be captured alive and suffer the humiliation for no reason. Outside the 33 heavens, in the supreme Daoyuotian realm, Daoist Miao Yuan smiled, narrowed his eyes at Daoist Purple Eyebrow, who had an unsightly expression on his face, and said, these ferocious soul stones are born in the chaos, and they are formed by the immeasurable power of fierce souls. It took the 5 Buddhist patriarchs 3 eons to find enough ferocious soul stones from the chaos. They concealed the ferocious aura within them with the power of Buddhism, then disguised them as the celestial divine gold, an essential material for crafting the investiture of the gods, and fused them into the investiture of the gods. That is why the investiture of the gods has so many strange problems. Chapter 1051. The 3 World Masters, the World Masters, the World Masters, and the World Masters, launched their attacks simultaneously, throwing the Vajra Amitba formation into a great mess. Inside the Vajra, the enormous whirlpool of Buddha power was clean and stable. Every single bit of Buddha power was moving according to the path of the formation, without any mistake. The 9 world masters were guarding the core of the formation, which was enough to ensure the perfect operation of the formation. However, the result of the 3 world masters destroying their spirit relic and golden bodies, risking their lives to unleash all of their powers, was like 3 enormous piles of cow dung suddenly being dragged into a clear stream by a stampeding herd of wild buffaloes. In the stream, which was about 10 feet wide and a foot deep, 3 lumps of cow dung, the size of a rice bucket, emerged. The originally crystal clear stream was immediately polluted into a mess, and the originally clear water also became messy. Tiny streams of Buddhist power collided and rubbed against each other, and the stable and constant vortex of Buddhist power inside the Vajra Muni collapsed on the spot. Along with a shrill howl, the 6 world masters, who had been concentrating on controlling the operation of the formation, spurted out colorful, sticky blood and spirit fire from their eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. Their skins cracked inch by inch, and blood splashed all over the sky. The 36 world masters, 36 ancient Buddhas, and countless bodhisattvas, Vajras, and Arhats had all sent their powers into the Vajra through their bodies. Now that the formation was in a mess, 90% of the tremendous Buddha power rushed into their bodies and exploded like thunderbolts. The 6 world masters were severely injured on the spot. They fell from the clouds, barely breathing. Except for the strongest world master, the other 5 had all fainted. Inside the formation, countless Chi-Chi world masters vomited blood. The counterforce of the formation was as great as a full power strike launched by them, and all of them were severely injured. After all, in the Vajra formation, none of them had the concept of self-defense. In their eyes, the formation could never be broken. All of their powers were used to maintain the operation of the formation, and none of them had the time to protect themselves. The Buddha world masters in the Vajra formation were indestructible, but also extremely fragile. As long as the formation was fine, no one in Pan-Gu world could hurt them. However, once there was a flaw in the grand formation, everyone would suffer the backlash of their own Buddhist power, and everyone would be heavily injured at the same time. They were beaten by their own power until they were on the verge of death. 99% of them did not even have the strength to move their pinky. Wu Qi, whose divine sense had seeped into the Vajra Muni, laughed in ecstasy. His enormous divine sense wrapped around the Vajra Muni, and his hands formed seals one after another. The Yuan Ling true flame fused with his divine sense and transformed into a white divine rune that blasted into the core of the Vajra Muni. Countless seals transformed into a huge palm that enveloped the purple halo at the core of the Vajra Muni. The mystic techniques in Scroll of Stealing were marvelous. The giant hand did not disturb Vajra Muni's nascent spirit, who was shrouded in the purple halo. Instead, it pierced through the protection of the purple halo like quicksilver, piercing through the countless innate defensive runes, bringing with it the white divine runes formed from Yuan Ling True Flame and his divine sense, as well as Yuan Ling True Flame as it came right before Vajra Muni's nascent spirit. The Vajra Muni was one of the most important treasures of the Buddhist path. It was the core treasure of the Buddhist path's Vajra Muni formation. With the Vajra Muni, there would be the Vajra Muni formation. Without this treasure, the Buddhist sect would lose the Buddhist sect's formation that was known as the #1 defensive formation in the world. Therefore, mouth-guarding Buddha had left a clone of Yuan Ling in the Vajra Muni formation. This clone of Yuan Ling had the overall strength equivalent to an almighty expert at the peak of Tao-breaking realm. As soon as the white divine runes transformed from Yuan Ling's true flame and the clone of Wu Qi approached Yuan Ling, the clone of mouth-guarding Buddha, who was sitting cross-legged above Yuan Ling, suddenly opened his eyes. The space inside the Vajra Muni temple suddenly expanded, while the clone of Yuan Ling's true flame expanded rapidly. In front of Wu Qi's clone of Wu Qi, he transformed into a golden statue of Buddha with 8 heads and 6 arms, standing hundreds of feet tall and entirely purple-green in color. Fellow Taoist, please step back. The Buddhist sect will form a good relationship with you. Yuan Ling's clone of mouth-guarding Buddha stared at the white divine runes transformed from Wu Qi's clone, then solemnly chanted the name of Buddha and made a promise. Wu Qi let out a long laugh. A dense black mist rushed out of his clone, within which countless starlight swirled. The dense starlight mixed with the black mist and instantly wrapped around Yuanling's clone of mouth-guarding Buddha. The heaven-veiling flag of chaos was fully activated. Wu Qi flew in front of Yuanling's clone of mouth-guarding Buddha and imprinted the white divine runes on the forehead of the golden Buddha. Body-splitting bandit's palm imprint. Wu Qi cried out. The body-splitting bandit's palm imprint, which was specially used to deal with all kinds of Yuanling and nascent divinity clones of mouth-guarding Buddha, transformed into layers of shockwaves with a very high frequency and smashed down. Yuanling's clone of mouth-guarding Buddha had just been wrapped up by the heaven-veiling flag of chaos, and before he could deal with Wu Qi, the body-splitting bandit's palm imprint had severely wounded his clone of Yuanling. Countless tiny cracks appeared on the purple-green golden Buddha statue. Mouth-guarding Buddha roared furiously, and more than 50% of the energy essence of Yuanling's clone vanished abruptly. Meanwhile, Wu Qi's clone of mouth-guarding Buddha had become twice as strong. Suddenly, mouth-guarding Buddha's eyes snapped open and he cried out in a hoarse voice, "Evildoer! Why you? You! Scroll of stealing! This is..." The heaven-veiling flag of chaos swept out in all directions, completely cutting off the connection between Yuanling's clone of mouth-guarding Buddha and the outside world. Wu Qi let out a long laugh and said, "I'll just collect some interest. Mouth-guarding Buddha, or perhaps, I should call you fellow Taoist Lao AI. In the past, you exchanged 3 casting pills with me with some precious treasures, and with the power of my pills, you were able to get rid of your original hairy body." Yuanling's clone of mouth-guarding Buddha was clearly struck dumb. Scroll of stealing? Wasn't the evildoer who cultivated the scroll of stealing killed by all the celestial fiends in the universe a long time ago? Why did he appear again now? As for the matter of the 3 casting pills, how long ago was that? It was so long ago that mouth-guarding Buddha himself had forgotten about it. He had even placed the name of Lao AI in the deepest part of his soul, and it had been a very long time since even his 6 like-minded senior and junior brothers mentioned the name. Who did he get those 3 cast body-shaping elixirs from? There were countless chaos-fiend gods who were good at killing and arson, but there seemed to be only one who was good at alchemy. But that person should have been killed by them in the ancient sacred palace. Why was he here? Staring at Wu Qi in astonishment, mouth-guarding Buddha asked hesitantly, "Fellow Taoist Yuanling?" Wu Qi sneered. He produced the Book of Life and Death and the Soul-Hooking Brush, 2 supreme treasures of Primal, at the same time. The Book of Life and Death unleashed a beam of bright light and fixed its eyes on Yuanling's clone, while the Soul-Hooking Brush made a light hook at his body. Both the Book of Life and Death and the Soul-Hooking Brush had an absolute restraining effect on all spirit bodies. Mouth-guarding Buddha let out a miserable howl, and Yuanling's clone, which was badly injured, was shattered into countless fist-sized purple-green liquid droplets that flew all over the sky. Wu Qi opened his mouth and sucked all the liquid droplets into his mouth. This was equivalent to the full cultivation base of a peak-stage Tao-breaking expert. Wu Qi felt a hot current surging through his body, and his strength instantly doubled. Yuanling's clone was exposed in front of Wu Qi. Wu Qi laughed wildly, and the white divine characters transformed from his clone smashed into Yuanling's clone. In the blink of an eye, he had gained preliminary control over the Diamond Muni. This Diamond Muni was a supreme treasure that mouth-guarding Buddha had refined with his heart's blood. Now that his clone had been killed by Wu Qi had obtained all the techniques to control the Diamond Muni from his clone's memory. Complacently, he copied Yuanling's clone, drew a hand seal, pointed at the void, and said, "Quick." The chaotic Diamond Muni array suddenly froze. The 6 revered ones, 36 ancient Buddhas, 36 Buddhas, and countless Bodhisattvas, Vajras, and Arhats who were falling from the sky suddenly trembled. Even though Buddhist cultivators valued cultivating their minds the most, at this moment, they could not help but show a trace of panic and despair. They looked up in shock at the Diamond Muni, who was shining brightly, and called out the name of Buddha in unison. The chaotic Buddhist power inside the Diamond Muni slowly rotated in the opposite direction. In addition to the diamond muni, the sky-veiling flag of origin wrapped in the boundless star power formed a starry array inside the diamond muni. The starlight stream transformed into a huge whirlpool, which worked with the diamond muni to mobilize the Buddhist power left in the diamond muni by the other Buddhist cultivators. All the power rotated rapidly, and the diamond muni turned into a huge black hole, crazily sucking in all the injured Buddhist cultivators. The huge arhat in the sky, which was on the verge of disintegration, gradually compressed and collapsed. A faint black mist spread in all directions, and the bodies of the Buddhist cultivators flew uncontrollably toward the diamond muni. Their Buddhist power was still tangled together, and everyone's power was sucking and tearing each other apart. In their injured state, they could not resist the violent attraction of the diamond muni. After being purified by the diamond muni, the enormous Buddhist power was transformed into a pure energy that was injected into Wu Qi's body, and was smoothly absorbed by him. 6 revered Buddhas, 36 ancient Buddhas, 36 Buddhas, countless bodhisattvas, and other Buddhist cultivators, all of them had cultivated for countless eons. Even those bodhisattvas of the level of gold immortal, although their cultivation base was not worth mentioning, the magic power they possessed could be called boundless. Wu Qi happily plundered all the cultivation base of these Buddhist cultivators, while the ferocious and violent Ninetails stood guard beside Wu Qi, wagging its huge head. A few arhats who were slightly injured tried to attack Wu Qi with their Buddhist treasures, but were knocked flying far away by the Ninetails' pincers. Gradually, the 6 revered Buddhas were sucked into the diamond muni, while the other Buddhist cultivators were also sucked into the diamond muni like dumplings. With a smile on his face, Wu Qi stabilized the diamond muni formation again. He reversed the direction of the formation and turned it from facing outside to facing inside. Unless those Buddhist cultivators who were sealed in the diamond muni could break through the formation formed by all their Buddhist power in one fell swoop, they would never be able to escape. But how difficult would it be to break through the diamond muni formation? It was something that even Buddha could not do, let alone them. The reversed diamond muni formation slowly rotated. All the Buddhist cultivators' magic power was constantly extracted and purified, and then gradually transferred to Wu Qi. Wu Qi felt the magic power in his body was gradually replenished, like a starving giant who had just received an abundance of food. His body was gradually filled with strength. A fragrant breeze came from the sky. The golden mist attendant who arrived late roared angrily out of humiliation. He raised his scepter and smashed it down at Wu Qi's head. Chapter 1052. Golden mist attendant flew into a rage and smashed down with his pestle. He was only 10 minutes late. He was one of the 7 Buddhist ancestors' personal attendants, the golden mist attendant who was famous for his various divine abilities. His heavenly feet divine ability was the best in Buddhism. It only took him an hour to rush from Gridrakota mountain to Mianhu city. This speed was even faster than the Buddhist venerables. However, with this speed, what did he see when he arrived? He saw the diamond muni formation reverse. Except for the 3 traders, all the Buddhist saints in the formation were sucked into the diamond muni primordial treasure. The impenetrable defensive formation had turned into a cage, trapping all the Buddhist deities within it. This was a formation that even the Buddha ancestor could not break. In other words, unless they killed Wu Qi and took back the diamond muni formation, the 6 Buddhist venerables, 36 ancient Buddhas, and 36 Buddhas would never be able to escape. All of this was because attendant Golden Mist had arrived 10 minutes late. As long as he was a little faster, just a little faster, as long as he threw Buddha's natal relic into the Vajra Muni formation, no one would be able to break it. How dare you, evil creature! Die! Golden Mist attendant roared. He, who was famous for his divine abilities, gave up all his divine abilities and used all his divine energy to smash the pestle at Wu Qi's head. He didn't want to kill Wu Qi easily with divine abilities. He wanted to use the demon's subduing pestle to beat him into minced meat inch by inch. Looking coldly at Golden Mist attendant, Wu Qi's magic power surged like the tide. With every passing second, his magic power skyrocketed. The Buddhist venerables, ancient Buddhas, and countless bodhisattvas, vajras, and arhats inside the diamond muni formation were howling. They were seriously injured and couldn't control their Buddhist power. The magic power they had cultivated for eons was being extracted by the reverse formation, purified by the diamond Muni formation and injected into Wu Qi's body. Compared to Wu Qi, who used thievery energy to devour heaven and earth's spiritual energy to increase his cultivation base, this kind of plundering extraction was tens of thousands of times faster than his own cultivation. At this moment, Wu Qi felt as though he was omnipotent. It was as though he could tear a hole in the world with a single punch. Under the impetus of the endless pure energy, Wu Qi's soul was slowly moving towards a mysterious and unpredictable realm. Vaguely, he grasped the core track of the great Tao of Pan-Gu world, and saw something that ordinary people couldn't understand. As long as he could integrate his Yuan Ling with these mysterious and unfathomable trajectories, he would officially progress to the Tao integration stage. Especially at this moment, there were countless Buddhists providing him with Dharma power. Once he stepped into the Tao fusing realm, his Dharma power cultivation would not be much weaker than those old monsters. At least, the Dharma power cultivation that the 6 revered ones and so many ancient Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Arhats offered to Wu Qi would definitely be several times stronger than that of the Huang clan. Chuckling coldly, Wu Qi casually raised his right hand. He did not use any supreme artifact of primal, but simply raised his right hand. He did not use any dharmic powers or divine powers. With a smile on his face, he used his palms to receive the demon-subduing pestle that Golden Mist attendant had struck at him with all his might. A loud boom rang out, and sparks flew in all directions. Wu Qi's fair palm, which looked like it was carved out of jade, did not move at all. On the other hand, the attendant of Gold Mist howled miserably, waving both his arms and legs as he was knocked flying away by the tremendous counterforce. The scepter was bent 90 degrees, and countless cracks covered its body. The webs between the thumb and forefinger of the Gold Mist servant were torn, and the cracks extended from his hands to his elbows. Golden blood kept gushing out, and countless cracks could be seen on the pale golden bones in his arms as well. A few golden thunderbolts flashed rapidly in Wu Qi's palm, but they only flickered for a while before vanishing without a trace. These thunderbolts came from the devil-subduing Buddhist seal personally sealed on the scepter by the Buddha himself. It had the great power to kill all evil and evil. However, the devil-subduing divine thunder unleashed from the Buddhist seal personally sealed by the Buddha did not even leave a scratch on the skin of Wu Qi's palm. The Gold Mist servant stared in horror at Wu Qi, who was acting as if nothing had happened, and muttered to himself, "What a tough body." Inside the withered heart cave on Mount Gridrakota, the 7 Buddhist ancestors, Chi-Chi, who were watching the commotion with full attention, gasped. As their personal attendant, Attendant Golden Mist was one of the most powerful figures in the Buddhist League. The evil-subduing pestle in his hand was forged by the 7 Buddhist patriarchs using innate materials collected from the chaos with their natal true flames. Its power was not weaker than any ordinary chaos spiritual artifact. Could Wu Qi destroy a chaos spirit artifact with his bare palm? Even the Buddhist seal personally blessed by the Buddha had no effect on him. How strong was this guy's fleshly body? The 7 Buddhist ancestors cultivated both nature and life, and they believed their fleshly bodies were extremely strong. But they knew that if they were to fight a chaos spirit artifact head-on, they would most likely be the ones injured. Where did this freak come from? How could he bend a chaos spirit artifact scepter with his bare palm? Wu Qi looked coldly at the dumbfounded Gold Mist servant and sneered. His divine soul began to stir, and he was about to approach the indescribably mysterious and unfathomable heavenly Tao. Just as Wu Qi was about to separate Yuan Ling and merge with the heavenly Tao's core, an inexplicable palpitation stopped him in his tracks. The first wisp of innate thieving energy that had merged with him pulsed gently, as if it had a different understanding of his Tao fusing. After pondering for a moment, Wu Qi gave up the urge to fuse with the Tao at this time. It was not only because of the warning from the thieving energy, but also because Wu Qi knew that if he fused with the Tao now, according to the agreement between the Huang clan and the other Tao fusing experts, he could no longer fight in this great God-conferment tribulation. Wouldn't he be giving up a great opportunity for no reason? Since the Daozu and the Buddhist ancestors could not fight, why not bully their disciples and grand disciples for more benefits? There was still a huge gap between Wuqi and the Daozu and the Buddhist ancestors in terms of magic power and cultivation base. But if he added the magic power and cultivation base of dozens of world venerables and sect masters, as well as the cultivation base of some Buddhist League and Taoist League almighty experts, he would not be too far off. Instead of fusing with the Tao now, he might as well wait until his foundation was stronger. He smiled and nodded at attendant Jinlan. A plume of black smoke shot out from the top of Wuqi's head, and the sky-veiling flag of chaos let out a whistling sound that swept across the heaven and earth. Dozens of black whirlwinds wrapped around attendant Jinlan and pulled him toward the Vajramuni, who hovered above Wuqi's head and glowed brightly. Attendant Jinlan was indeed a powerful figure famous for his various divine powers in the Buddhist League. When he was pulled by the sky-veiling flag of chaos, his body turned into thousands of golden beams and a large cloud of fragrant smoke that scattered in all directions. He had actually broken through the sky-veiling flag of chaos and escaped into the void. Good. Wuqi gave a loud laugh, then casually pointed the soul-hooking brush at the void. The attendant gave a muffled snort as the myriad of beams of golden light once again gathered together. His eyes were spinning as he fell to the ground. The Book of Life and Death and the soul-hooking brush were specialized in attacking all kinds of spirit bodies. Attendant Jinlan's soul was nearly blown out of his body by the soul-hooking brush. At the moment, he could only barely stabilize his mind to prevent his soul from being taken away. How could he have the strength to resist Wuqi? With a flick of the sky-veiling flag of chaos, attendant Jinlan drifted into the Vajramuni. At the same time, his profound cultivation base was drawn out by the reversed formation, flying into Wuqi's body and becoming a part of Wuqi's mighty primal purple energy. A furious bellow rang out from Mount Gridrakada's withered heart cave. Immediately after that, countless auspicious clouds rose from all over the mountain. Countless pagodas, lotus flowers, Bodhi trees, forests of 7 treasures, and many other auspicious objects of the Buddhist League flew all over the sky, protecting the vast army of Buddhist League as they hurried toward Panga continent. The 7 Buddhist ancestors were truly infuriated. They were truly enraged. For a long time, Wuqi, the king of East Sea of Diyu, was just a nobody in their eyes, and they never thought that Wuqi was qualified to participate in the godhood conferment. But, Wuqi had shattered attendant Jinlan's staff with a palm strike, and he had also shown that he had 4 supreme treasures of primal, the sky-veiling flag of chaos, the Vajramuni, the Book of Life and Death, and the soul-hooking brush. With such prowess and wealth, he was strong enough to stir up trouble. The 7 Buddhist patriarchs felt that they had misjudged him, and their anger was even more infuriating than when attendant Jinlan was forcibly taken away by Wuqi. On top of that, all the schemes of the Buddhist League in Mianhu City had come to nothing. In their anger, they simply sent out the army of the Buddhist League to fight recklessly. In the face of absolute power, all the schemes were nothing. The 7 Buddhist patriarchs thought that after so many years of keeping a low profile and accumulating strength, the Buddhist League was now strong enough to do something. 300,000 miles west of Mianhu City, after Wuqi took attendant Jinlan into the Vajramuni, Yingzheng and the other 5 saint emperors burst into laughter. Nearly 1,000 supreme towers unleashed dark evil energy and Yin flame at the same time, protecting the reinforcements as they rushed toward Mianhu City. Wei Wuji, the violent man, even snapped from the cloud, Daoist Tianji, Daoist Wuyo, and that little godly show, if you dare to touch a finger of King Wei Shan, I swear I'll wipe out your descendants, slaughter your entire clan, and wipe out all the living beings in the world who are related to you. The deafening roar shook the earth and shook the mountains near and far. Presumably, Daoist Tianji and his companions in Mianhu City, as well as Gao, must have heard the roar as well. Wuqi, too, flew up to Ninetail's back, waved the pole of sky-veiling flag of chaos, and smashed it hard at the beast's head. Ninetails threw his head back and roared, then flew toward Mianhu City, shaking his head and wagging his tail. Behind Wuqi were countless reinforcements of Diyu, escorted by nearly 1,000 supreme towers. Among these reinforcements were not only the newly formed Flying Bear Army from Liangzhu, but also the Celestial Army under the command of the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan and the Yen Emperor Shenong. The army galloped forward. When they were less than 100 miles away from Mianhu City, a distance that Wu Qi and his companions could cover with just a twist of their bodies, a bright light suddenly shone in the sky, and a vast mist rose into the air. Countless Taoists, feather warriors, Chuanjin cultivators, and hermits, clad in robes of different lengths, colorful crane cloaks, and all kinds of strange ornaments and treasures, stood in front of Wu Qi and his companions with a smile on their faces. A long cry rang out as a middle-aged Taoist, clad in a moon-white Taoist robe and a black crane cloak, flew forward on a cloud, his body shrouded in a layer of watery light, and the top of his head releasing specks of golden light that turned into countless golden lotuses and drifted in all directions. Then, he cupped his fist and bowed to Wu Qi and his companions. "Benefactors, please turn back. You are not allowed to go to Mianhu City." Chapter 1053. Upon hearing Taoist Ming Ying's words, Yan Revered no longer bothered to save his face. With a wave of his hand, the few revered ones behind him, as well as the many ancient Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, spread their palms open at the same time. Lotus flowers bloomed in their palms, and within each lotus was a Buddhist kingdom. Countless fully armed Buddhist armies, such as Vajras, strongmen, heavenly kings, and Jidis, marched out in neat rows, quickly forming a battle formation in the surroundings. "Holy Mother Empress Hua, do you think what I'm doing will work?" Taoist Mingying was taken aback by Wu Qi's brazen attack. He had never seen someone like Wu Qi before. Both Buddhist League and Tao League paid particular attention to the relationship of karma and retribution. Ao Buzan had offended Taoist Mingying, and as the master of Ao Buzan, Wu Qi should pick up the karma, and step aside obediently today, instead of making things difficult for Taoist Mingying. But, Wu Qi actually attacked him. How could he be so unreasonable? The leader of the group was a 36 feet tall revered ones of the Buddhist League. He did not even spare a glance at Wu Qi. Instead, he gave Taoist Mingying a sidelong glance and said with a cold grin, "Taoist Mingying, I don't want to ruin the harmony between our two clans. Step aside, His Majesty Emperor Wugo of Shizhou Dynasty wants to return to the capital city of Shizhou Dynasty through Mianhu City." Wu Qi patted the nine tails beneath him and said cunningly, "My mount is this nine-tailed scorpion, and as for Ao Buzan, ha ha ha, he has something to do with the East Sea." The bronze dagger axe changed its target and locked onto the revered one's chest. Grinning coldly, Taoist Mingying said, "There are thousands of great Taoists in the world, and any one of them can lead you back to Calmheart City. But, today, this Mianhu City belongs to Tao League." Every prime disciple had a cultivation base of at least the first tier of Tao breaking realm, and some, like Taoist Chicheng, had an excellent innate talent, and almost had one of his feet stepped into the realm of Tao fusing. That was why the Taoist in front of him gave Wu Qi such a strong sense of threat. He really had the ability to threaten Wu Qi's life. With Taoist Mingying standing in their way, they could not even spare Wu Qi and his companions, let alone the many holy saints of Buddhist League who were approaching menacingly with a murderous aura. "Great! Let's have a fight between your two clans. Which clan survives in the end?" Apart from Gao, everyone else in Yuxiong army belongs to that clan. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi cupped his hands towards the Taoist and asked, "May I know your name?" Wu Qi smiled. Clearly, he had seized the opportunity when the three revered ones were stirring up trouble to reverse the Vajra Muni formation, subduing countless Buddhist saints in one fell swoop. This move had deterred the almighty experts of Tao League, led by Taoist Mingying. That was why they seized the opportunity of what Ao Buzan had done in the past to trap Wu Qi, telling him to ignore what was happening here. At this critical juncture, a fragrant breeze lingered in the sky, and auspicious mists rose into the air. Escorted by countless celestial fiends from outer domains, countless holy saints of Buddhist League were flying whistling through the air. Amidst these holy saints of Buddhist League was the emperor of the Shizhou Dynasty, Emperor Wugo. These holy saints of Buddhist League, who usually wore kind and benevolent countenances, had turned into ferocious fiends today. How could they not be angry when the Vajra Muni formation was destroyed and the Vajra Muni temple was taken away? For a moment, the atmosphere was extremely stiff. The tough attitude of the Buddhist League was beyond everyone's expectation, and Taoist Mingying did not know how to deal with it. Even though Wu Qi had made great progress in his cultivation base, he instinctively felt threatened when facing this Taoist who was clad in a white Taoist robe and a black crane cloak. I reckon this Taoist is the first disciple of some Daozu, right? Wu Qi knew the rules of the Tao League. The so-called first disciple was actually equivalent to the elders of technique imparting in ordinary immortal sects, and this was the kind of person who passed on his or her skills on behalf of his or her master. Taoist Mingying twitched his lips and quickly changed the topic. King of East Sea, is Ao Buzan the king of East Sea's mount? Taoist Mingying smiled. He gave the 6 saint emperors standing behind Wu Qi a glance, then nodded and said, in that case, we really need to discuss this matter with the king of East Sea. Ao Buzan has abducted the mounts of me and the other fellow Taoists, and this karma has to fall on the king of East Sea. Either the king of East Sea returns our mounts, or the king of East Sea can turn around and head eastward, and leave this matter alone. The white-clothed Taoist smiled faintly. He gave Wu Qi a glance, then nodded and said, I'm Taoist Mingying from Mount Wujin. I've long heard of the reputation of the king of East Sea, and now that I've met you today, you are indeed better than the reputation. The Vajra Muni formation of the Buddhist League was single-handedly destroyed by the king of East Sea. Taoist Mingying remained silent. Wisps of immortal light kept flashing on his palm, which was gripping the bronze dagger axe. Obviously, he was injecting all his immortal energy into it. He stared coldly at Wu Qi, while 3 sharp tips of the dagger axe kept emitting a cold green gleam, making his brows and beard turn green. Sure enough, one's overall strength decided everything. If not for Wu Qi's trick just now, how could these almighty experts of the Tao League negotiate with him so calmly? It was as deep as the ocean, unfathomable. All of a sudden, Wu Qi burst into laughter. He clapped his hands and said, excellent. 6 saint emperors, let's have a fight. Whoever survives in the end, apart from Gao, will have all the soldiers of Yu Xiong army belong to the winner. What do you say? Hundreds of grains of sand were shattered by the heaven-pacifying sword. A sword beam flashed, and in a hurry, Taoist Mingying tilted his body to one side, allowing the sword beam to brush past his body. Suddenly, the black crane cloak he was wearing disintegrated, and countless black crane feathers rushed out in all directions, forming into a huge taiji diagram in front of him. The sword light swept across the 8 trigrams pattern formed by the feathers. Thousands of crane feathers were cut off by the sword light, slowly falling to the ground. When these almighty experts of the Buddhist League cast aside all their scruples and exposed the military force they had accumulated over the years, the 6 saint emperors' faces flickered. As far as their eyes could see, the sky was filled with soldiers summoned from the Buddhist kingdoms by the almighty experts of the Buddhist League. Even the weakest bodhisattva of the Buddhist League could gather 800 Buddhist kingdoms, and each Buddhist kingdom had at least 100 million believers. As long as 1 in a million of these believers could be converted into a Buddhist League army, one could imagine how large an army these Buddhist League almighty beings could gather once they let loose. About the time of 3 breaths, Wawang clan's soft voice was heard coming from the void. The blood centipede sword flashed across the sky, slicing dozens of grains of sand in half. But, these grains of sand were frighteningly heavy and extremely tough. After slicing through dozens of them, the sword's light dimmed abruptly, and hundreds of grains of sand came smashing at it at high speed, causing clanging noises to ring out of the sword and shooting out beams of flame. At the same time, Wu Qi laughed aloud and said, that was Ao Buzan's doing. What does it have to do with me? If Taoist Mingying is dissatisfied with him, you can capture him alive and skin him alive. Don't blame the karma he caused on me. Wu Qi shook his head hastily and said, don't talk nonsense, Taoist Mingying. It was clearly the few Daozu who broke the Vajra Muni formation, and it has nothing to do with me. I just took advantage of the situation, and the culprit is still your Tao League. Whoever pooped the shit should clean it up himself. Don't put the shit on others. How dare you? Taoist Mingying suffered a great loss. His immortal body was nearly sliced into 2 by the heaven-pacifying sword. If not for the fact that his crane cloak was also a rare treasure, perhaps he would have been killed by Wu Qi. Flying into a rage out of humiliation, Taoist Mingying pulled out a pale green bronze dagger axe from under his sleeve. He weighed it in his right hand, then pointed the 6-feet-long dagger axe at Wu Qi. He snorted coldly and unleashed a large sheet of dark mist from the sky-veiling flag of chaos to cover his body, while the Vajra Muni sprayed out a yellow bell-shaped light barrier that wrapped around Wu Qi. Wu Qi smiled at Taoist Mingying and said, "This treasure seems to be pretty good, but can it really break the Vajra Muni formation? Although I can only borrow 70% of its power through the Vajra Muni, do you think you can break it?" In the entire Tao League, there were only 27 prime disciples among the 9 Daozu, while there were several hundred true disciples. Apart from Taoist Chicheng, who was planted by the Huahuang clan, the other 26 prime disciples had a very high status in the Tao League, and all the other true disciples addressed them as Shifu. The almighty experts from both Tao League and Buddhist League were taken aback, and then they heard Wu Qi throw his head back and cry out loud. With the Book of Life and Death in his left hand and the soul-hooking brush in his right, Wu Qi clenched his jaws and injected all his power into the 2 supreme treasures. 2 subtle auras locked onto Taoist Mingying's immortal soul. Once Wu Qi activated the 2 treasures, he would be able to launch a deadly attack on Taoist Mingying's immortal soul. While shouting, Taoist Mingying sprayed out a clump of dense purple mist. A faint and refreshing purple mist pervaded the air, covering an area of several tens of acres in circumference. Inside of it, countless thumb-sized, translucent, bluish-purple grains of sand could be seen flying in all directions. Each grain of sand weighed as much as a star, and when they flew in the air, they produced loud, muffled noises that sounded like thunderclaps. Occasionally, when a few grains of sand collided with each other, a deafening boom would immediately erupt and sparks would splash in all directions. Waving his hand, Wu Qi called back the heaven-pacifying sword, then looked at Taoist Mingying and sneered. "Since you want to risk your life, I'll do it." Gao was in Mianhu City, and Wu Qi would never let someone he considered as a friend be bullied and killed like this. Wu Qi's expression flickered. The bronze dagger axe looked inconspicuous, but the energy aura it emanated was extremely fierce, as if it contained an aura that could tear and destroy everything. Even with Wu Qi's eyesight, he could not see through the origin of this bronze dagger axe. Perhaps, it was an extraordinary artifact bred in the chaos, and possessed a lethality beyond Wu Qi's expectation. "King of East Sea, this sword strike of yours has sown enmity between you and me. Don't blame me for whatever karma you face in the future," cried Taoist Mingying angrily. Almost all of them had inherited the complete cultivation technique of a certain Daozu, and would selectively teach a part of it to those true disciples with suitable aptitudes. For example, a certain true disciple would be suitable to cultivate the Thunder Immortal technique, while some would be suitable to cultivate the Ice Immortal technique, some would be suitable to refine flying swords to kill and set fires, and some would be suitable to concoct pills to save lives and cure illnesses. But, Wu Qi was not a man who could be so easily limited by the so-called karma. Upon hearing Taoist Mingying's words, he wasted no time and spat out the blood centipede sword, an innate spirit artifact condensed from the primal purple energy. Then, it slashed down towards Taoist Mingying's head amidst a foot-thick blood-red beam of light. In his previous life, the heaven-pacifying sword, a chaotic spirit treasure crafted by Wu Qi, had shrunk to the size of a finger, and was thrust out amidst the blood-red beam of light. Clang! The blood centipede sword was shattered by the sandstorm, exploding into a clump of faint primal purple energy that drifted and drifted in all directions. Wu Qi opened his mouth and inhaled, sucking the primal purple energy back into his mouth. He let out a soft cry and breathed out a mouthful of prime energy. Abruptly, the heaven-pacifying sword returned to its original form, then thrust towards Taoist Mingying with a dim and inconspicuous sword beam. Chapter 1054. The 3 parties met in Mianhu City and fought fiercely for the sake of Yuxiong army. De Yu was in a precarious situation, and the Shizhou dynasty was aggressive. On the contrary, Great Wu, which was located in the southern region, was quiet and peaceful at the moment, like a paradise. Taking advantage of the war between De Yu, the Shizhou dynasty, and the fallen Ling dynasty, Great Wu had stealthily occupied many territories and acquired countless people. Now, Great Wu's territory was about 30% of Dayu's. Although its overall national strength was far inferior to Dayu's, in terms of military strength alone, Great Wu's military strength was impressive. In particular, Reverend Shozhua had used his mighty divine ability to move countless mountains from all over Pangu continent to surround Great Wu's territory. He had even spent a great deal of magic power to deploy countless defensive formations and other defensive mechanisms on these mountains, leaving only one road leading to the north. The passage was tens of miles wide and about 10,000 miles long, with nearly 100 checkpoints of various sizes densely packed in the winding passage. The whole of Great Wu had been turned into a curled-up hedgehog by Reverend Shozhua, making it impossible for anyone to find where to start. Moreover, Gigu Zi had deployed the art of Chimen Duanjia everywhere, and Mod had led countless disciples of Mo's sect to build powerful war puppets. Although Great Wu had been quietly developing in the southern region, once its strength exploded, it was enough to cause a great disturbance on Pangu continent. Just as Wu Qi was provoking the Buddhist League and the Tao League to fight, a small army appeared outside Great Wu's northernmost military town, the Uncontending City. Uncontending City was the name given by Reverend Shozhua, the current Great Wu's Grand Celestial Master. It represented that Great Wu had no intention of fighting with other powers, and only wanted to live quietly in a corner. However, there were millions of soldiers stationed in the city, and no less than 100,000 war puppets of various colors. Only Reverend Shozhua himself knew whether the name, Uncontending, was worthy of its name. Lu Bang, clad in a long black robe, stood in front of the city gate that was thousands of feet tall and smiled. Proud of his success, he waved his hand and said lightly, "Go and ask them to open the gate. Tell them I'm here to visit Wu Tianming, the Emperor of Great Wu, at the order of the Celestial Emperor." Standing next to Lu Bang were his confidants, Zhang Liang, Xiao He, Han Xian, and Fan Kuai, and behind them were the famous 28 celestial lords of the Celestial Court. There were 84,000 celestial lords of the universe, and these 28 celestial lords ranked among the top among them. Their actual combat strength was also in the top 100, and their cultivation base had reached the level of Gold Immortal. Once they used their natal star power to strengthen themselves, their strength was enough to fight against Tao-breaking experts. Zhang Liang arrived at Wuzheng City in a blur and announced Lu Bang's name and the purpose of his visit. The general on the wall immediately sent the news back to Great Wu's imperial capital. In just 10 minutes, the sound of cannons could be heard coming from inside the city. The gate of Wuzheng City was thrown open, and a column of soldiers in bright armor and full of vigor marched out, forming 2 rows in front of the gate like Chi-Chi. 12 beautiful girls slowly pushed a roll of red felt out of the city gate. The scarlet cashmere felt stretched all the way to Lu Bang's feet from the city gate. Looking through the open triple gate, one could see a column of soldiers standing solemnly along the street, and the scarlet cashmere felt stretched all the way from the gate to the depths of the city. A general in full armor, even his face covered by a ferocious bronze mask, walked slowly out of Wuzheng City. He cupped his fist and bowed to Lu Bang, then cried out in a deep voice, "Please enter the city, King of Han. I've prepared a chariot and guards to escort King of Han all the way to the imperial capital to meet His Majesty." The general's aura was strange. He seemed to have practiced some superficial divine abilities and magic, but there was not much energy fluctuation in his body. He was tall and gave off a strong aura of flesh and blood. Clearly, he was practicing a body-tempering technique. The strange thing was that the cultivation technique he practiced seemed to have the aura of the human race's true body of heaven and earth scripture, but also had a strong demon aura. All in all, the general's aura made people uneasy, and it made it impossible to figure out his background. The only thing they could be sure of was that this man's cultivation base was not weak. Whether he was practicing a body-tempering technique or an ordinary magic or divine ability, he was probably at the same level as a primordial immortal. Although he was only the weakest primordial immortal who had just stepped into the realm of primordial, it was still frightening. A mere Great Wu was not a target that the Tao League and Buddhist League could cultivate with all their might. Yet, there was a primordial immortal among the generals guarding the first military town. Who exactly was supporting Great Wu? Sensing the mysterious aura of the general, Fan Kuai took a step sideways without batting an eyelid and stood in front of Lu Bang. Noticing Fan Kuai's action, the general could not help but laugh strangely. I've heard a lot about King of Han. Why are you so timid? Hee, I've been ordered to invite you to the imperial capital to meet His Majesty. Do you think I'll harm you? You people are so damn paranoid. If I really wanted to harm you, I would have given the order to round you up and chop you up. Impatiently, he lifted the ferocious bronze mask on his face, revealing a furry, pale green wolf face. The general, who stood over 10 feet tall and emanated a strange and powerful aura, was a wolf demon. With his cultivation base, he could transform into a human, but he still retained the appearance of a wild wolf. At this moment, he was baring his teeth and grinning at Lu Bang, with saliva dripping from between his teeth, which made him look very frightening. Not to mention Lu Bang, even Fan Kuai and Han Xian were shocked. They hurriedly shielded Lu Bang behind them, their faces extremely unsightly. Strange laughter rang out from the top of the wall as a few Great Wu generals, also clad in full armor and bronze masks, lifted their masks at the same time, revealing the furry, ferocious faces of wild beasts. There were wild boars, hyenas, sheep, marmosets, and 8 generals, all of whom were demons. The dozen generals beside them, who were also laughing, also took off their masks. These generals looked like ordinary mortals, but when they saw them putting their arms around the fairy general's shoulders, Lu Bang and the others could not help but be stunned. How could demons and humans get along so well in Great Wu? Taking a deep breath, he pushed aside Fan Kuai and Han Xian, who were standing in front of him, then cupped his fist and bowed to the wolf demon with a smile. I've made a fool of myself. I never thought Great Wu would be like this. Well, may I ask what your position is in Wuzhou City? The wolf demon licked his nose, held his head high, and said with a cold grin, I'm Lang Qingfeng, and I'm the Lord Commander of Wuzhou City. I'm in charge of all the military towns and checkpoints within 1,000 miles of the city. Don't talk nonsense, King of Han. You're a guest who came to visit, and it's not appropriate for a guest to keep His Majesty waiting. Lu Bang nodded with a smile. With a hint of surprise that he could not hide, he led his entourage into Wuzhou City. A chariot pulled by 9 black dragons was already waiting in the city. Lu Bang boarded the chariot, surrounded by 3,000 guards and soldiers, and the procession headed for Great Wu's capital in a mighty procession. Lu Bang was overjoyed. He did not expect that humans and demons could get along so well in Great Wu. It was a pleasant surprise. If the wisdom of the human race and the formidable combat prowess of the demon race could be combined into one, the power would be extremely terrifying. For example, if Great Yu could be friendly to the demons in its territory, Great Yu's national strength would be more than doubled. Sitting in the chariot, Lu Bang murmured to himself in a low voice, if I can persuade Great Wu's emperor to cooperate with me in my great plan, then great things can be achieved. Han Xian smiled coldly and said in a low voice, Wu Tianming has to agree whether he wants to or not. Since Daozu has appointed His Majesty to replace Zhang Tingyun as the future human emperor, then he, Wu Tianming, has to obediently offer Great Wu to His Majesty. Otherwise. Lu Bang turned his head to look at the 28 celestial lords of the constellations, who were standing near the chariot and looking curiously at the scenery in Great Wu's territory. A smug smile came over his face. If Wu Tianming did not agree to his request, then he would simply kill him. How delightful it was to kill him, seize his foundation, and use Great Wu's national strength to achieve great things. As for Great Wu, it was said that a very powerful Reverend Shozhuo was their grand celestial master, but so what? He was at most an itinerant cultivator of the Tao-breaking realm. Would he dare to fight against the will of the entire Tao League? When he met Reverend Shozhuo, he would have to carefully distinguish which school of immortal magic he cultivated. All the immortal magic in the world came from the sect masters of the Tao League, and when the time came, he would directly ask the ancestral master of his lineage to come forward. Would Reverend Shozhuo dare to betray his ancestral master? If Wu Tianming cooperated with him and offered Great Wu's land, people, an army for him to command, then when the great thing was done, he would be conferred a good divine title. Great Wu was just a small, unknown kingdom in outer heavenly realms. As for his emperor, it would be a good deal for him to be conferred the title of General Land or General Mountain God of Panga Continent, right? While Liu Bang was scheming, in the imperial palace of Great Wu's capital, a lobbyist was persuading Wu Tianming and Reverend Shoujua, Gigu Zi, and Mod, who were sitting next to him. Wu Tianming, who had had too much fun with the imperial concubines last night, yawned on the throne, while Reverend Shoujua sat motionless on the hassock like a clay sculpture. Gigu Zi's mind was wandering, and he was gesticulating in the air with a finger. Mod, on the other hand, tilted his head and looked out of the great hall, his deep, unfocused eyes looking somewhere. The lobbyist standing in the middle of the great hall, clad in a pale golden monk's robe and a red kasaya, was telling Wu Tianming and the others about the benefits they could get if Great Wu merged with the Shizhou dynasty and cooperated with the Shizhou dynasty to completely defeat Diyu. The monk, who had a fair, square face and looked trustworthy, promised Wu Tianming that once the Shizhou dynasty replaced Diyu and Emperor Wugo became the human emperor, Wu Tianming would be one of the new sacred emperors of the human race, and he would be able to achieve the supreme great Tao with virtue. As for Great Wu's grand celestial master, Reverend Shoujua, and the two imperial advisors, Gigu Zi and Mod, all of them could become Buddhas. The few Buddhist patriarchs could even pass on their mantle, so that the three celestial masters and the imperial advisors would have the opportunity to fuse with the Tao. Just as the monk was talking extravagantly, Liu Bang's convoy arrived. The sound of footsteps rang out as a few eunuchs led Liu Bang and his company into the great hall and bumped into the monk.